My name is Whitney Henderson. I'm 38. 3 weeks ago, I sat in a hospital room and watched my mother try to form words after a stroke, and the first full sentence she managed was, "Your brother told me you didn't want me anymore." That sentence broke something open inside me. Because for 18 months, I'd been calling, texting, driving 4 hours to visit, and my brother Derek had been blocking every single attempt. He moved back into Mom's house after his divorce. He told her I abandoned her. He changed her phone number. He redirected her bank statements to a P.O. box in his name. And while my 71-year-old mother sat alone in that house believing her daughter forgot about her, Derek drained her savings account. $340,000. 247 withdrawals. The last one was made at the hospital ATM, 3 hours after Mom's stroke. Before I tell you exactly how I found out and what I did about it, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you think this story is worth hearing. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now let me take you back 18 months to the day my brother moved back into Mom's house and everything started to change. Derek called me on a Tuesday in March. I was at my desk at Richmond Memorial, buried in a stack of insurance claims, when his name lit up my phone. He never called during work hours. I picked up and heard something I hadn't heard since we were kids, my older brother crying. His wife, Tammy, had filed for divorce. She got the house in Henrico County. She got primary custody of their 2 boys, Mason and Tyler. Derek had 30 days to find somewhere to live. "I've got nothing, Whit," he said. "I've got a duffel bag and a maxed-out credit card." I didn't hesitate. "Move in with Mom. She's been alone since Dad died. She'd love having you there." He paused. "You think she'd be okay with that?" "Derek, she asks about you every time I call." I phoned Mom that night. Dorothy Henderson, 71 years old, retired elementary school teacher, living alone in the same 3-bedroom house in Millfield, Virginia. White picket fence, azalea bushes along the driveway, the porch swing Dad built the summer before he got sick. She said yes before I finished the sentence. I wired Derek $2,000 the next morning. Moving expenses. First month's groceries. He texted back, "You're the only one who gets it, Whit. Thank you." 2 weeks later, my neighbor Patty Greer, Mom's best friend for 20-some years, called me. "Your mama's so happy," she said. "Derek's cooking dinner every night. It's like the house has life in it again." I smiled. I really did. Then Patty added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, Derek told me not to mention it, but your mama took a little fall last week. She's fine, though." I called Derek that night. He laughed it off. "She slipped on the porch steps. I was right there. Didn't want you to worry." I let it go. He was my brother. Why wouldn't I? The first month was normal. I called Mom every Sunday at 6, same as always. She told me about the garden, about the new curtains Derek hung in the kitchen, about the pot roast he made that was almost as good as Dad's. "Almost, not quite," she said, and we both laughed. By the second month, the calls got shorter. "Mom, how are you feeling?" "Tired, honey. I'm tired." "Did you go to Dr. Patel this week?" "Derek took me. I'm fine." Then she'd hand the phone to Derek, or he'd already be on the line. "Mom's resting, Whit. I'll have her call you back." She never did. Every month, I transferred $500 into Mom's checking account. Her medication copays, groceries, the little things pension didn't quite cover. I'd been doing it since Dad passed. It was automatic. I never expected a thank you, but Mom always mentioned it. "Got your deposit, sweetheart. You don't have to do that." Every single month, until she stopped mentioning it. "Derek, did Mom get the transfer this month?" "Yeah, she said thanks. She just forgot to tell you." My mother taught 2nd grade for 31 years. She wrote thank you cards for thank you cards. Dorothy Henderson did not forget. But I told myself she was adjusting. Having Derek in the house was a change. She was probably just settling into a new routine. I checked my bank app. The transfers were going through, same account, same amount, every month. The money was landing. That was enough. I didn't have access to her savings account. I'd never needed it. She was my mother, not my client. And Derek was there. Derek was handling things. That's what I kept telling myself. May rolled around. Tax season had finally loosened its grip. I'd been working 60-hour weeks at the hospital, reconciling billing codes until my eyes crossed. I picked up the phone to call Mom on a Sunday evening and heard 3 sharp tones. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I called again. Same message. I tried her cell. Disconnected. My hands went cold. I dialed Derek. Oh, yeah, Mom switched carriers. New number. He rattled off 10 digits. Sorry, I forgot to send it to you. I called the new number Monday morning. Voicemail. Tuesday. Voicemail. Wednesday. Voicemail. I left messages each time. Gentle ones. Hey Mom, just checking in. Call me when you can. No callback. The following Saturday, I drove 4 hours south to Millfield. The dogwoods were blooming along Route 15, and the afternoon light hit the Blue Ridge just right, but I barely noticed. I pulled into Mom's gravel driveway at 3 o'clock. Derek met me at the front door. Not Mom. Derek. She's out with friends, he said, leaning against the doorframe. I looked past him. Mom's Buick was parked in the garage. Her car's right there. Patty drove her. They went to the garden center. I called Patty from the driveway. Did you take Mom somewhere today? No, sweetheart. I've been home all day. When I walked back to the porch, Derek shrugged. Must have been someone from church then. She just left. I stayed for an hour. Mom never appeared. Derek made small talk about the Orioles and poured me iced tea I didn't drink. That night, back in my apartment in Richmond, a text came through from Mom's new number. Whitney, I need some space. Please don't come by for a while. The phrasing was wrong. My mother had never used the word space in her life. But Derek was my brother, and I still believed that meant something. Growing up in the Henderson house, there were 2 kinds of kids. There was Derek, varsity quarterback, homecoming king, the son who made Dad's chest puff out at Friday night games. And there was me, honor roll every semester, worked the register at Creekside Pharmacy after school, graduated summa cum laude from James Madison. Mom clipped my report cards to the fridge. Dad framed Derek's football jerseys on the den wall. I'm not saying I was neglected. I wasn't. My parents loved me. But Derek occupied a different kind of space in our family. He was the story people told. I was the one who stayed after the party to wash the dishes. When Dad got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 years ago, Derek flew in for the big moments. The diagnosis meeting, the surgery, the last weekend. I was the one who drove Dad to chemo every Thursday for 7 months. I sat with him in those vinyl chairs while poison dripped into his arm, and he told me about the summer he met Mom at a county fair. After Dad passed, I handled the medical bills. $12,000 the insurance didn't cover. I paid it out of my savings over 14 months. Nobody asked me to. Nobody knew I did it. I still have the receipts in a manila envelope in my filing cabinet. At the memorial dinner, Aunt Karen, Dad's older sister, 65, silver hair, voice like a church bell, put her hand on Derek's shoulder and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, Derek gave up everything to be close to your mama. What's your excuse, Whitney? I was standing right there. I'd just written the last check to Mercy General 2 days before. I didn't say anything. I never did. That was the pattern. Derek got the credit. I did the work. And I kept letting it happen because I thought blood meant trust. By August, 5 months after Derek moved in, my mother had vanished from her own life. She stopped going to Millfield Baptist, the church she'd attended every Sunday for 30 years straight. Not for snowstorms, not for the flu, not even the week we buried Dad. I called Pastor David. He said Derek had phoned the church office. Mom's not feeling well. She'll be back when she's stronger. I called Dr. Patel's office next. The receptionist checked the system. Mrs. Henderson has canceled her last 3 appointments. Who canceled them? I'd have to check. It looks like someone called on her behalf. I started writing letters, actual pen-on-paper letters mailed through the post office because Derek couldn't intercept those, or so I thought. I wrote 3 over the next month. None came back, none were answered. September was Mom's birthday, 71. I ordered her favorite, yellow roses, 2 dozen, with a card that said, "Happy birthday, Mom. I love you. Call me anytime. Whitney." I had them delivered to the house. Derek texted me a photo that evening. Mom sitting at the kitchen table, roses in a glass vase, smiling at the camera. She loves them. Thanks, Whit. I stared at that photo for a long time. The smile looked right. The eyes didn't. Mom had lost weight. Her collarbones jutted beneath her blouse. Behind her, the kitchen counter was cluttered with takeout containers and unopened mail. I zoomed in. On the counter, half hidden behind a pizza box, a stack of envelopes. I couldn't read the return address, but the top envelope was from Shenandoah Valley Federal Credit Union, Mom's bank. It sat there, unopened. And something in the back of my mind, the part trained by 15 years of reading billing discrepancies, started whispering. I ran the math the way I run hospital audits, dispassionate, column by column. Mom's savings account held $340,000. That was 30 years of teaching, 3 decades of clipping coupons, skipping vacations, driving the same Buick until the odometer rolled past 200,000. Dad used to joke that Mom could squeeze a nickel until the buffalo screamed. She saved because saving was how she loved us. Every dollar was a promise that her kids would be okay. Her pension brought in $2,100 a month. Social Security added another $1,400, enough for groceries, utilities, property tax, and her medications. The savings account was the safety net, the thing that would pay for assisted living if she ever needed it. $4,000 to $6,000 a month, depending on the facility. Without that savings, she'd run out of options within a year. If Derek was spending Mom's money, and I still had no proof, only a growing dread, and I did nothing, here's what would happen. The savings would empty. Mom would have no cushion. If her health declined further, I'd be the one covering the gap on a hospital billing specialist's salary. And if Derek managed to get legal guardianship before I even understood the situation, he'd have total control. But that wasn't the stake that kept me up at night. The real stake was this. My mother might die believing her daughter abandoned her. 18 months of silence. Not because I chose silence, but because someone built a wall between us and told her I put it there. I still didn't have proof. I had instinct and a photograph of an unopened bank envelope. On October 14th, at 2:13 in the morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Millfield area code, but it wasn't Derek. It was Patty Greer, and she was crying. "Whitney, you need to come now. Your mama had a stroke. The ambulance just took her." I was on I-64 South within 12 minutes. 2:15 in the morning, rain sheeting across the windshield, my knuckles bone white on the steering wheel. The Civic's high beams carved tunnels through fog in the Shenandoah Valley. I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't cry. I drove. 4 hours and 5 minutes. Millfield Regional, the emergency entrance. I parked crooked across 2 spaces and ran. The woman at the front desk pointed me to the 4th floor, room 412. I took the stairs because the elevator was too slow. The door was half open. Mom lay in the bed, eyes closed, tubes in her arm, a monitor beeping in steady rhythm. The left side of her face drooped slightly. A thin line of drool trailed from the corner of her mouth to the pillow. Derek sat in the corner chair. A paper coffee cup rested on the windowsill beside him. His phone was in his hand. He looked up when I walked in. "Oh, you came." I stood in the doorway, still wearing the sweatpants I'd thrown on at 2 in the morning. "Why didn't you call me?" "I called the doctors. I was handling it." "Mom had a stroke, Derek. Patty called me at 2 a.m. You had 3 hours. He set the phone face down on his thigh. "I was going to call you in the morning. I didn't want to wake you." I looked at my mother. at the monitors, at the IV drip, at Derek's coffee cup. He'd had time to find the cafeteria. A nurse passed behind me in the hallway. I caught her arm gently. "Excuse me, were you on shift when Mrs. Henderson was admitted?" She nodded. 11:02 p.m. I turned back to Derek. He was already looking at his phone again. The nurse leaned close to my ear. "Just so you know, your brother took your mother's wallet and phone from her belongings bag right after she was admitted. Said he needed to keep them safe." Derek left the room around 7 to get breakfast. I'd been sitting in the other chair for nearly an hour, watching Mom's chest rise and fall, counting the seconds between each beep on the monitor. When her eyes opened, they were glassy and confused. Her right hand twitched against the blanket. The left side of her face barely moved. I slid my chair closer, took her hand. "Mom, it's Whitney. I'm here." She blinked. Her lips parted. A sound came out, rough and broken, like words dragged across gravel. She tried again, and again. Then slowly, one syllable at a time, she said it. "He told me you didn't want me anymore." The heart monitor beeped. The fluorescent light above us buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled across linoleum. "Who told you that, Mom?" Her eyes drifted toward the door. Toward the hallway Derek had walked down 2 minutes ago. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I held her hand and I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the grief counselor taught me after Dad died. 18 months. For 18 months, my mother lived in that house believing I didn't care. She sat at that kitchen table, looked at the phone that never rang, because Derek made sure it couldn't, and thought her daughter had thrown her away. She spent holidays alone with a man who was robbing her and telling her it was love. I squeezed her hand. "Mom, I called you every single week. He changed your number. I drove down twice and he told me you didn't want to see me." She closed her eyes. A tear slid from the corner of her right eye into the pillow. I didn't cry. Crying was for later. Right now I needed to think, because if Derek lied about me, what else did he lie about? I found the charge nurse at the station down the hall. "My mother's personal belongings, her wallet and phone. Where are they?" The nurse checked her notes. Her son, Derek Henderson, took them from the belongings bag last night. He said he'd keep them in the car. "I'd like them back. I'm her daughter." "You'll need to speak with him directly. He's listed as primary contact." I went back to the room and waited. Derek returned at 7:30, carrying a blueberry muffin and a fresh coffee like it was any other morning. "I need Mom's wallet," I said. He took a bite of the muffin. "It's at the house. Safer there." "Bring it here." "Why?" "Mom needs toiletries. I'll pick them up." "I can handle that." "Derek, give me Mom's wallet." He chewed slowly. 5 seconds of silence. Then, "I'll look for it when I go home tonight." "And her ATM card?" His jaw stopped mid-chew, just for a beat, half a second. Then he swallowed and shrugged. "It's in the wallet." "Then bring the wallet today." He didn't answer. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. I walked to the parking lot, sat in my Civic, pulled up the number for Shenandoah Valley Federal Credit Union. An automated menu. Press 1 for accounts, press 2 for customer service. "I need to check the status of a savings account. The account holder is Dorothy Henderson. I'm her daughter, Whitney Henderson." "Ma'am, for account access, you'll need to visit a branch in person with valid identification." "Where's your nearest branch?" "Millfield on Main Street, open at 9. I looked at the clock on my dashboard. 8:47. He couldn't look me in the eye when I asked about that card. His jaw had stopped, half a second, but I caught it. I turned the key in the ignition. The Millfield branch of Shenandoah Valley Federal sat between a hardware store and a diner on Main Street. I walked in at 9:03 with my driver's license, my birth certificate, and a knot in my stomach. The branch manager, Russell Cahill, was a broad-shouldered man in a navy blazer who shook my hand like he meant it. I told him my mother was in the hospital, I told him I needed to see her savings account activity. He asked for my ID, checked the system, pulled up Dorothy Henderson's account. Then he went quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that has weight. "Let me print this for you," he said. The printer hummed. 14 pages slid into the tray. I sat at his desk and started reading. The first withdrawal, $800, 3 days after Derek moved in. Then 500, 1,200, 2,000. The amounts climbed like stairs. Some weeks had 3 transactions. Some had 5. ATM pulls, counter withdrawals, Zelle transfers, debit purchases, all from one account, all in 18 months. 247 transactions. Total withdrawn, $340,000. Account balance, $43.17. My hands were steady through page 10. By page 12, they weren't. I turned to page 14, the last page, and read the final line. ATM withdrawal, $300. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Location, ATM, Mercy General Hospital. My mother was admitted to that hospital at 11:02 p.m. 45 minutes. He'd waited 45 minutes, while she was being wheeled into the ER, walked downstairs, and pulled $300 from the ATM in the lobby. I set the paper down. Russell cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. The mailing address on this account was changed 16 months ago. Statements rerouted to a P.O. box." He turned his monitor toward me. "Box 2247, registered to Derek Henderson. $43.17. That was all that remained of my mother's entire life. I'm going to pause here for a second, because when I was sitting in that bank, staring at those 14 pages, I thought about every phone call my brother didn't let me make, every visit he blocked, every lie he told my mother about me. If you've ever had someone in your family weaponize your absence against you, you know exactly what I felt in that chair. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if this story is hitting close to home, hit subscribe. Because what I did next, I need you to hear it. Now, back to the story. I checked into the Millfield Motor Inn that afternoon. $49 a night, floral bedspread, a window unit that groaned like it had opinions. I spread all 14 pages across the bed and opened my laptop. This is what I do for a living. I reconcile hospital billing statements. I match procedure codes to insurance payouts. I find the line that doesn't belong, the charge that slipped through, the decimal in the wrong column. 15 years of training my eyes to catch what doesn't fit. I highlighted in yellow for ATM withdrawals, pink for point-of-sale purchases, green for electronic transfers. Then I started building a spreadsheet: date, amount, location, category. The pattern came into focus within an hour. $28,000 in Zelle transfers to an account under the name Megan Torres. I'd never heard that name. I searched Derek's Facebook. There she was, tagged in a photo from June, his arm around her at a rooftop bar in Charlottesville. His new girlfriend, funded by our mother's retirement. $15,000 in payments to Bet Rivers, an online gambling platform. Spread across dozens of small transactions, 50 here, 200 there, then a single charge of $3,000 on a Friday night. $47,000 in credit card payments, all to cards in Derek's name. A $6,200 purchase at Blue Ridge Motors. I cross-referenced the date with Derek's Instagram. 2 days later, he'd posted a photo of a silver Dodge Charger with the caption, "Fresh Start." My mother's fresh start money, her 30 years of teaching, her coupon clipping, vacation skipping, nickel-squeezing savings, turned into gambling debts, a girlfriend's Venmo, and a muscle car. I saved the spreadsheet, backed it up to my cloud drive. Then I pulled 3 counter-withdrawal slips Russell had photocopied, the ones requiring a signature. Mom's name was on each one, but the handwriting tilted wrong. The loops were too tight. The capital D in Dorothy looked nothing like the way she'd always written it. I photographed everything. I found Claire Whitmore's name on the Virginia State Bar website at 1 in the morning, sitting cross-legged on that motel bed with my laptop balanced on a pillow. Elder law attorney, Charlottesville office, 14 years of experience in financial exploitation and guardianship cases. I emailed her a summary at 1:20 a.m. She replied at 7:15. Can you come in today? Her office was on the second floor of a brick building off the downtown mall. She was younger than I expected, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. No small talk. She pointed to the chair across her desk and said, "Show me what you have." I laid out the 14 pages. The Excel spreadsheet printed in color, the P.O. box registration, the photos of the withdrawal signatures. She read for 20 minutes without speaking. Then she took off her glasses. This is textbook elder financial exploitation, systematic withdrawals, redirected mail, social isolation of the victim, cognitive decline that likely predates the stroke. She tapped the signature photos. And these don't match. She walked me through the options. File a report with Adult Protective Services. They'd open an investigation. Simultaneously notify the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for criminal charges, and petition the court for emergency guardianship to protect Mom going forward. The bank records alone are strong, she said, but if we can get a medical evaluation showing your mother had diminished capacity during the period of these withdrawals, the case becomes airtight. I stared at the stack of papers between us. If I file, could Derek go to prison? Claire held my gaze. Elder financial exploitation is a felony in Virginia. With this amount? Yes, he could. The room was very quiet. This isn't a family disagreement, Ms. Henderson, she said. This is a crime, and your mother is the victim. I drove back to Mercy General that afternoon, straight to the 4th floor. Room 412. A nurse I hadn't seen before stood in my path. I'm sorry, visiting for Mrs. Henderson has been restricted. Family only. I am family. I'm her daughter. The nurse checked her clipboard. The primary caregiver, Derek Henderson, submitted a visitor restriction request this morning. Only immediate household members. My mother doesn't have household members. She has children. I'm one of them. The nurse looked uncomfortable but didn't budge. You'll need to take it up with administration. I called Derek from the hallway. He picked up on the first ring, almost like he'd been waiting. Why am I blocked from seeing Mom? Doctor said she needs rest. You showing up and interrogating her isn't helping. I'm not interrogating her. I'm her daughter. A daughter who didn't visit once in 18 months. His voice had that slick, practiced calm. The voice he'd used at the car dealership, the one that made people sign before they finished reading. I'm protecting Mom, Whitney. I kept my voice level. You're protecting Mom. By draining $340,000 from her account? 5 seconds of dead air. Then the line went dead. 1 hour later, my phone buzzed. A group text from Derek to the entire Henderson family, Aunt Karen, Uncle Bob, cousins Rachel and Tim, even Pastor David. Hey everyone, wanted to let you know Whitney showed up at the hospital making accusations and upsetting Mom. She hasn't been around for 18 months and now she's trying to take control of Mom's finances while Mom can barely speak. I need your support. Mom needs stability, not drama. Aunt Karen replied within 3 minutes. Derek, you're Mom's rock. We're behind you 100%. My phone kept buzzing. Uncle Bob, cousin Rachel, all backing Derek. Not one of them called me to ask my side. Aunt Karen called the next morning. I was sitting in the motel parking lot eating a gas station granola bar for breakfast. Whitney, honey, I know you mean well, but your mama is sick. This isn't the time to start a fight. Aunt Karen, I'm not starting a fight. Derek has been there every single day. He cooks for her. He drives her to church. Well, he was driving her to church. She paused. The point is, he sacrificed his whole life after that awful divorce. And you come back after 18 months and start throwing around accusations? I opened my mouth, closed it. opened it again. Have you asked Derek where Mom's money went? Dorothy's money is Dorothy's business. Derek wouldn't steal from his own mother. Uncle Bob texted me that afternoon. Your father wouldn't want this, Whitney. Family doesn't go to war with family. Cousin Rachel sent a message that was 3 paragraphs of gentle scolding dressed up as concern. The gist? Maybe I should take some time to process my guilt about being absent before making things worse. By Wednesday, Derek's narrative had spread through Millfield Baptist, the pharmacy, the diner on Main Street. My brother, the small-town hero, devoted son, taking care of his sick mother. And me, the daughter who lived 4 hours away and only showed up when there was something to gain. He'd done to me exactly what he'd done to Mom. He'd built a wall of lies and dared anyone to look behind it. I called Claire Whitmore from the motel room that evening. My voice was steady. My hands were not. He's blocking me from seeing her. The whole family is against me. Claire didn't miss a beat. Then we go somewhere he can't block you. The law. A PS called me back. They've opened a case file. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. 3 days later, Derek sent an email to the whole family. Subject line, family meeting, Mom's future. Hi everyone, I'd like to invite you to meet at Mercy General this Sunday at 2 p.m. to discuss long-term care options for Mom. She's going to need full-time help, and I think we should make these decisions together as a family. Conference Room B, 4th floor. Derek. I read it twice. The tone was warm, reasonable, concerned. Classic Derek, the same voice that sold extended warranties on used sedans. I knew exactly what this meeting was. He wanted the family to officially hand him guardianship. He'd sit at the head of the table, say all the right things about Mom's care, and walk out with legal control over a woman whose savings he'd already stolen. I called Claire. He's holding a family meeting Sunday. He wants guardianship. Go. With what? He's got the whole family in his pocket. Bring the bank statements, 3 printed copies, your spreadsheet, the P.O. box documentation. I'll be there with you. You'd come? Ms. Henderson, I've handled 40-some elder abuse cases. The abuser almost always tries to consolidate power while the victim is incapacitated. That meeting is your window. Saturday night, I sat in the motel room and printed 3 complete sets of transaction records on the motel's ancient business center printer. 14 pages each, highlighted, yellow for ATM, pink for purchases, green for transfers. I stapled each set, placed them in a manila folder, added the P.O. box form and the signature comparisons. I looked at the family photo I kept in my wallet. Mom, Dad, Derek, me. Christmas 2014. All 4 of us smiling in front of the tree. I didn't want to destroy my family. But my family had already been destroyed. I was just bringing the proof. I didn't sleep that night. But I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Conference Room B was beige walls, a long table with 8 rolling chairs, and a window that looked out over the parking lot. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they always do in hospitals. That low, constant drone that gets inside your teeth. They were all there by 2 o'clock. Aunt Karen in her Sunday blouse, silver cross necklace resting on her collarbone. Uncle Bob in a flannel shirt, arms crossed. Cousins Rachel and Tim side by side, looking uncomfortable. Pastor David sat at the far end, hands folded on the table, quiet. Derek stood at the head. "Thank you all for coming," he said. He'd shaved, put on a button-down. He looked like a man about to deliver a eulogy, somber, composed, in control. Mom's recovery is going to be a long road. She's going to need full-time care. I've been here every day since she came in. I've been here every day for 18 months. He let that land. I want to formally request the family's support to become Mom's legal guardian. Aunt Karen nodded. Uncle Bob murmured something that sounded like agreement. Derek turned to me. I sat at the opposite end of the table. Claire Whitmore was in the chair to my right, dark blazer, leather briefcase on the floor beside her. "Whitney, I'm glad you're here," Derek said. He smiled. That Carlot smile. I hope we can work together on this. He glanced at Claire. The smile dimmed half a watt. Who's this? My attorney, I said. The room shifted. Aunt Karen's eyebrows drew together. Uncle Bob unfolded his arms. Pastor David looked up from his hands for the first time. Attorney? Aunt Karen said. Whitney, this is a family meeting, not a courtroom. Derek's smile returned, wider now. See? This is what I was talking about. She's here to start trouble. I reached down and opened my bag. The manila folder sat heavy on my lap. No, Derek, I said. I'm here for Mom. I placed 3 sets of stapled pages on the table, slid one to Aunt Karen, one to Uncle Bob, kept one in front of me. Mom's savings account, I said. My voice was even, no tremor. 18 months of transactions, 247 withdrawals, total amount $340,000, current balance $43.17. Aunt Karen picked up her copy the way you'd pick up a letter you're afraid to open. Uncle Bob put on his reading glasses. Nobody spoke. Page 7, I said. June 15th. $3,200 transferred via Zelle to Megan Torres. I looked at Derek. Your girlfriend. His face went from composed to pink in under 2 seconds. Page 11. 4 payments to Bet Rivers, an online gambling site. $15,000 total. Derek opened his mouth. That's not... Page 14. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The last transaction. ATM withdrawal, $300. Time, 11:47 p.m. Location, the ATM in the lobby of this hospital. I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Mom was admitted at 11:02 p.m. She was being wheeled into the emergency room, and you walked downstairs and pulled $300 from her account. Aunt Karen set the pages down. Her hands were shaking. Uncle Bob's reading glasses had slid to the tip of his nose, but he didn't push them back up. He just stared at the numbers. Pastor David rose from his chair without a word, walked to the door, and left the room. Cousin Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. Tim stared at the table. Derek stood at the head of the table, mouth half open, looking from face to face for someone, anyone, who would meet his eyes. No one did. I didn't raise my voice. 14 pages of bank records speak louder than anything I could ever say. Derek's hands came up, palms out, the way a man does when the ground starts moving under him. Look, this is Mom's money, he said. She gave it to me. I asked, and she said yes. I've been taking care of her. You were taking care of her, I said. While telling her that her daughter abandoned her, while changing her phone number, while canceling her doctor's appointments, while redirecting her bank statements to a P.O. box in your name. Aunt Karen's head snapped toward Derek. A P.O. box? Claire Whitmore opened her briefcase. She placed 2 documents on the table. The first was a letter from Adult Protective Services confirming an open investigation into the financial exploitation of Dorothy Henderson. The second was a preliminary cognitive assessment from Mom's neurologist, findings consistent with mild cognitive impairment beginning at least 6 months before the stroke. Under Virginia law, Claire said, her voice carrying the clipped authority of someone who had said this in conference rooms and courtrooms and living rooms more times than she could count. Withdrawing funds from an elderly person's account while that person is cognitively impaired and isolated from family constitutes elder financial exploitation. It's a Class 3 felony. Derek's face had gone from pink to white. Everyone, listen. His voice cracked. This is my sister trying to take Mom away from me. She didn't visit for 18 months. Uncle Bob set both palms flat on the table. The sound was louder than it should have been. Sit down, Derek. Derek blinked. Sit down. He sat. Aunt Karen stared at her copy of the bank statements. Her fingers traced the highlighted lines, yellow, pink, green, one after another. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red and wet, and they were fixed on Derek. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I placed one more sheet on the table. The bank's address change authorization form. Mom's name printed at the top, a signature at the bottom. Next to it, I set down a birthday card Mom had sent me 3 years ago. The handwriting was round, looping, generous. The way she'd always written, in the careful cursive of a woman who'd spent decades teaching children to form their letters properly. "Look at the signature on the bank form," I said. "Then look at her handwriting on this card." Aunt Karen held them side by side. The difference was obvious. The bank form's signature was cramped, angled, rushed. The D in Dorothy tilted the wrong way. The card was unmistakably Mom's hand. "Derek changed the mailing address 16 months ago," I said. "Mom's statements were sent to P.O. Box 2247. His name, his box. She never saw a single transaction. She had no idea the money was gone." Uncle Bob took off his reading glasses and pressed his thumb and forefinger against his closed eyes. Cousin Rachel whispered to Tim, $340,000. Derek sat in his chair, shoulders curled forward, staring at the table. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. I looked at him, my brother, 4 years older, the boy who'd pushed me on the tire swing in the backyard, the teenager who'd driven me to my first school dance, the man who'd read our father's eulogy with a steady voice while I sobbed in the front pew. "You can pay back money, Derek," I said. "You can't pay back the 18 months she spent thinking I didn't love her." The conference room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant beep of a heart monitor somewhere down the hall. Aunt Karen put her head in her hands. Claire stood. She didn't rush it. She buttoned her blazer, placed both hands on the back of her chair, and addressed the room the way an attorney addresses a room, with the weight of procedure behind every word. "I want to make sure the family understands the next steps. Tomorrow morning, we will file a petition for emergency guardianship of Dorothy Henderson, with Whitney Henderson named as proposed guardian. We have also filed a formal report with Adult Protective Services and referred the case to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for criminal investigation into elder financial exploitation." Derek pushed back from the table. "You can't do this. You're destroying this family." I looked at him. "No, Derek. You destroyed it when you pulled $300 from the hospital ATM while Mom was in the ER 3 floors above you." Aunt Karen lifted her head. Mascara tracked down both cheeks. Her voice came out thin, fractured. "Derek, is this true? All of it?" He didn't answer. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, stood up, walked to the door. Uncle Bob's voice came low and hard from the other end of the table. "Derek, you walk out that door. Don't come back." Derek stopped. His hand was on the handle. He stood there for 3 seconds, the longest 3 seconds, and then he opened it and left. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click that sounded like a lock turning. The room let out a collective breath. I sat with my hands folded over the manila folder. Through the window, I could see the parking lot below, and beyond it, the 4th floor of the hospital wing where my mother lay in room 412, still trying to relearn how to speak. Claire touched my elbow. "You did well." I didn't feel like I did anything well. I felt like I'd just performed surgery on my own family without anesthesia. "I want to ask you something. When I was sitting in that room, holding those bank statements, every relative who'd judged me for 18 months finally saw the truth. But the hardest part wasn't proving what Derek did. The hardest part was accepting that my own brother did it. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right, tell me in the comments. Because this next part is where everything changed for Mom and me. And now, let me tell you what happened next. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The county courthouse in Millfield smelled like old wood and floor polish. Claire and I walked through the metal detector and up to the 2nd floor. Family court. We filed the emergency guardianship petition at the clerk's window. Attached, the bank records, the APS report, Dr. Patel's cognitive evaluation, the address change form, and a sworn affidavit from me detailing 18 months of blocked calls, canceled visits, and my mother's own words in the hospital. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Delaney, a gray-haired woman with bifocals and a no-nonsense set to her jaw, reviewed the packet in chambers. It took 40 minutes. She signed the order at 9:47 a.m. Whitney Henderson, appointed emergency temporary guardian of Dorothy Henderson. Derek Henderson, barred from accessing any financial account in Dorothy Henderson's name. All existing powers of attorney held by Derek Henderson revoked immediately. By 10:15, I was on the phone with Russell Cahill at the bank. Every ATM card linked to Mom's account, deactivated. Every password, changed. Every alert, set for any withdrawal over $200. Statements rerouted to my address in Richmond. By 11, I was on the phone with Mercy General's patient services. Next of kin updated. Visitor restrictions removed. Derek's primary caregiver designation scrubbed from the file. At noon, I walked into room 412. Mom was propped up in bed, a speech therapist working with her on vowel sounds. When she saw me, her right hand reached out. I sat down, took her hand, and for the first time since I'd arrived in Millfield, for the first time in 18 months, my mother smiled at me. Small, lopsided from the stroke, but real. "I'll be here every day, Mom. I promise." She squeezed my fingers. Once. Twice. That was enough. The investigator from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office was a woman named Lieutenant Dana Marsh, 50-ish, short hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She met me in a small interview room at the county offices on Tuesday afternoon. I brought everything. The bank statements. The spreadsheet, printed, color-coded, with a legend at the top. The P.O. box documentation. The signature comparisons. Screenshots of Derek's group text to the family. A printout of his Facebook photo with Megan Torres dated to the same month as the Zelle transfers. Lieutenant Marsh reviewed each document methodically. She made notes on a yellow legal pad. $28,000 to the girlfriend's Zelle, she said, half to herself. $15,000 to gambling, $47,000 to credit card debt. She looked up. "Did your mother have any history of gambling?" My mother's idea of a wild night was 2 games of Scrabble and a glass of sweet tea. The ATM withdrawal at the hospital will pull the security footage. Timestamps will either confirm or deny. It'll confirm. She closed her legal pad. Ms. Henderson, $340,000 from a 71-year-old stroke victim with documented cognitive impairment. This is exactly the kind of case we prioritize. We'll be contacting the bank for their surveillance records and reaching out to your brother for a formal interview. She walked me to the door. Paused. "One more thing. Do you have any indication your brother had a gambling problem before this?" "He was fired from his last job, sales manager at a car dealership. They said it was performance-related, but he never gave me details." She wrote something on her pad. "I'll look into it." I sat on the stone bench outside the courthouse. The afternoon sun came through the maples, warm and yellow. I called Patty. "I filed, Patty." Her voice broke. "Your mama would be proud, sweetheart. When she understands what happened, she'll be so proud." 3 days after the family meeting, my phone rang at 9 in the evening. Derek's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. His voice was different. No charm, no practiced calm. Just a man standing at the edge of something and looking down. "Whitney, please, don't go through with the criminal charges. I'll pay it back. I'll sell the car. I'll sell everything I have." "You stole $340,000, Derek. How much do you actually have?" Silence. A long one. "I'll figure it out. Just, please. I'm your brother. You're my brother who told our mother I abandoned her." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know I did that, and I know it was wrong. I was drowning, Whitney. Tammy took the boys. I lost my job. The gambling got out of control. I moved in with Mom and I told myself I'd pay it all back. Every month I told myself next month I'd stop. But you didn't stop." "No." You rerouted her bank statements so she'd never see the withdrawals. Yes. You changed her phone number and blocked me from seeing her. I was scared you'd find out. And the night of her stroke, the ATM. He was crying now. Ugly, ragged sobs. She was in the ambulance. I wasn't thinking. The bills were due and Derek. I kept my voice steady. Don't tell me what Mom would want. You've spoken for her long enough. More sobbing. I listened. I didn't hang up. I didn't comfort him. I love Mom, he said. I do. Then you should have protected her. Instead, you were the one she needed protection from. I hung up, set the phone face down on the nightstand, stared at the motel ceiling until the water stain above the bed blurred. He wanted me to choose family over Mom's safety, but Mom is my family. She always was. 6 weeks later, the grand jury returned its indictment. Derek Allen Henderson, 3 counts of elder financial exploitation, a Class 3 felony, 1 count of forgery, 1 count of identity theft for using Mom's personal information to establish the P.O. box and alter her banking records. If convicted on all counts, he faced 2 to 20 years. Claire called me with the news while I was sitting with Mom at the rehabilitation center in Henrico County, the one I'd transferred her to, 20 minutes from my apartment. Mom was working with a speech therapist, practicing consonant clusters, her right hand gripping a foam ball for strength. She was getting better, slowly, painfully, but better. Grand jury indicted on all counts, Claire said. Derek retained counsel. They'll likely negotiate a plea. Okay, I said. You all right? I'm sitting with my mother while she relearns how to say the word daughter. So, no. But I'm where I need to be. Derek's attorney reached out to the Commonwealth attorney within a week. Plea negotiations began. I stayed out of it. That wasn't my battle anymore. The law had the evidence. The law could do its work. I focused on Mom. One Thursday afternoon, during a quiet moment between therapy sessions, she turned to me. Her words came slowly, each one a small victory. Whitney, did your brother take my money? I set down the magazine I'd been pretending to read. Yes, Mom, he did. She closed her eyes. A single tear ran down the right side of her face, the side that still worked properly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I pulled my chair close, took her hand. You have nothing to be sorry for, Mom. He lied to both of us. She opened her eyes, looked at me, and said, in a voice barely louder than the hum of the air conditioning, I thought you forgot me. Never, Mom, not for one single day. Here are the numbers. I'll give them to you straight because that's all numbers deserve. $340,000. Gone. Derek's recoverable assets totaled roughly $47,000, the Dodge Charger, some electronics, a few thousand in a checking account he hadn't yet drained. After Claire hired a forensic accountant to trace the flows, the maximum realistic restitution came to about $60,000, including the car sale and a lien on any future earnings. That left $280,000 that would never come back. Gambled away, spent on a girlfriend who didn't know where the money came from, poured into credit card minimums for debts he'd racked up before he ever touched Mom's account. Mom's monthly income, pension plus Social Security, totaled $3,500. A decent assisted living facility in Virginia costs $4,000 to $6,000 a month. Without the savings cushion, she couldn't afford long-term care on her own. The math didn't work. It wasn't close. So I did what needed doing. I sold my apartment in Richmond. The one I'd spent 4 years paying the mortgage on. The one with the bay window where I used to read on Sunday mornings. I netted $52,000 after closing costs. Moved into a studio in a cheaper neighborhood. 600 square feet, street noise, a kitchen the size of a closet. The difference went into Mom's care fund. My mother saved for 30 years. She pinched every penny, drove the same car, never took a real vacation. $340,000. 3 decades of discipline and sacrifice. Erased in 18 months by her own son. I'd spend years trying to rebuild a fraction of what she'd lost. I knew that. I'd made peace with it. Some debts aren't measured in dollars. They're measured in time, the years she spent saving and the years I'd spend making up the difference. Millfield is a small town, 1,200 people, 2 stoplights, 1 diner where the waitress knows your name and your order and your business. News doesn't travel in a place like that. It detonates. Within a week of the family meeting, everyone knew. The church ladies, the pharmacist, the woman at the post office who'd been renting P.O. Box 2247 to Derek without knowing what it was for. Pastor David never mentioned Derek from the pulpit, but his sermon that Sunday was about the sin of betrayal within families, and every head in every pew knew exactly who he was talking about. Megan Torres, Derek's girlfriend, the one who'd received $28,000 via Zelle, broke things off the day after the indictment became public. She called me, actually, crying. "I didn't know," she said. "He told me it was his severance pay. I swear I didn't know." I believed her. I didn't have the energy not to. Aunt Karen called me on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks after the meeting. She didn't lead with small talk. "Whitney, I owe you an apology. I stood in that room for 18 months and told people you were the problem. I was wrong." "You weren't wrong for trusting your nephew," I said. "You were wrong for not asking your niece." She was quiet for a long time. "You're right. I should have called you." "Yes, you should have." The extended family began reaching out, one by one. Some apologized. Some just asked how Mom was doing, which was its own kind of apology. I accepted each one without keeping score. Rebuilding takes enough energy without adding a ledger. Claire secured a court order barring Derek from the property. The house on Maple Street, white picket fence, azalea beds, porch swing, sat empty while Mom recovered. Patty kept an eye on it, picked up the mail, watered the plants. The town moved on. Towns always do. But Dorothy Henderson's name carried a different kind of weight now. Not pity, but respect for what her daughter had done. 2 months after the stroke, Mom's speech came back in fragments. Nouns first, then verbs, then the connective tissue that holds a sentence together. Her therapist said recovery was a staircase, not a ramp. Some days she climbed 3 steps. Some days she slid back 1. On a Tuesday afternoon in December, Mom was sitting in her wheelchair by the window at the rehab center, watching sparrows fight over the bird feeder in the garden. I was beside her, answering work emails on my phone. She hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. Then she said, "I remember." I put the phone down. "I tried to call you," she said. Each word was deliberate, placed like a foot on uncertain ground. "I dialed your old number, many times. It didn't work. I asked Derek for your new number. He said you changed it. He said you didn't give it to him." I pulled up my phone's call history. 18 months of outgoing calls to her old number, dozens and dozens of them, all unanswered. I turned the screen toward her. "I called you every week, Mom. Every single week." She stared at the screen. Her lips moved as she counted the entries. Then she looked up at me, and her face did something I hadn't seen since before any of this started. It crumpled. The right side. The working side. It collapsed into grief. "Every week?" she said. "Every one." She reached for me with her good hand. I took it and leaned forward, and she pulled me in. Not hard because she couldn't, and pressed her forehead against my shoulder. "I was so angry at you," she whispered. "For months. I was so angry, and you were calling the whole time." "It's not your fault, Mom. None of this is your fault," she cried, and I cried. For the first time since this started, I let myself. Right there, in the fluorescent light of a rehab center, with sparrows chattering outside and a physical therapy session scheduled in 30 minutes, I held my mother and we grieved together for the 18 months we'd lost. The plea deal came through in February, 4 months after the indictment. Derek pleaded guilty to 1 count of elder financial exploitation, reduced from a Class 3 to a Class 5 felony. The forgery and identity theft charges were folded into the plea. Sentence: 3 years. Suspended, meaning he wouldn't serve time in prison as long as he met every condition. 5 years of supervised probation. $60,000 in restitution, paid in monthly installments. 500 hours of community service. And a protective order. No contact with Dorothy Henderson except through pre-approved, supervised visits. Claire called me from the courthouse. I was at the rehab center, sitting in the hallway while Mom did her afternoon exercises. "It's done," Claire said. "He took the deal." "Okay. The restitution will take years, but it's enforceable. If he misses a payment, he goes back before the judge." "Okay. Whitney, are you all right?" I watched through the glass door as a physical therapist helped Mom stand from her wheelchair. One hand on the parallel bar, one shaky step, then another. "He's not going to prison," I said. "No, he's not." Part of me, a small hard part I'm not proud of, thought he should. 3 years behind bars for every lie, every stolen dollar, every night my mother spent alone believing I didn't love her. But a bigger part of me, the part that sounds like my mother on her best days, just wanted it over. I didn't need Derek in a cell. I needed Mom to never hear her son's name in the context of a prison sentence. She'd suffered enough. $60,000 wouldn't replace 340. Justice doesn't always look the way you imagine it. Sometimes it just looks like your mother being safe. And for now, that would have to be enough. 6 months after the stroke, Dorothy Henderson came home. I drove her myself. A Thursday morning in April, dogwoods blooming again along Route 15, just like the night I'd driven south in the rain to find her in that hospital bed. This time, the sky was clear, and my mother was sitting in the passenger seat, awake, alive, and watching the mountains roll past the window. She used a walker now. Her left side was still weak. Her speech was clearer every week, but long sentences tired her out. She needed help with meals, with bathing, with the small daily tasks she used to handle without thinking. I'd hired a part-time home care aide, a woman named Gloria, early 50s, practical and kind. She'd come mornings, Monday through Friday. I'd arranged to go hybrid at the hospital, 3 days in Millfield, 2 days in Richmond. My boss didn't love it, but she understood. Patty was waiting at the curb when we pulled into the gravel driveway. She'd planted new azaleas along the front walk, pink and white, and tied a ribbon on the porch railing. I helped Mom out of the car. She gripped the walker, stood on the driveway, and looked at the house. The white fence, the porch swing, the kitchen window where she used to set pies out to cool. "Home," she said. Patty hugged her, carefully. "Welcome back, Dot. I've got the garden looking good for you." Inside, I'd made changes. A lower bed frame, grab bars in the bathroom, a new cordless phone on the nightstand, with my number programmed as speed dial 1. I set up her new bank account that week. Cosigner, me. Statements mailed to both addresses. Automatic alert for any withdrawal over $200. Russell Cahill at the bank reviewed the setup personally. No one would ever reroute Dorothy Henderson's mail again. I sent an email to the entire Henderson family the following Sunday. I wrote it at Mom's kitchen table while she napped in the next room. "Dear family, Mom is home and recovering. I am her legal guardian. All questions about her health or finances should come directly to me. Derek is under a court-supervised protective order. He may visit Mom only through scheduled, supervised sessions as approved by the court. Anyone who facilitates unsupervised contact between Derek and Mom will be reported for violation of the court order. I don't hold grudges, but I will hold boundaries. Mom's safety is not negotiable. Whitney." Aunt Karen called an hour later. "I got your email. I understand, Whitney, and I support you." "Thank you, Aunt Karen. You can show your support by visiting Mom on Sundays. She'd love that." "I'll be there this week." I made one more call, the last one I would make to Derek for a long time. "Derek, you have the right to see Mom through supervised visits. I won't block that. But you will make every restitution payment on time. And you will never, ever, tell Mom anything about me without me present." Whitney. His voice was hollow. Do you hate me? I thought about it. Genuinely thought about it. The tire swing, the school dance, the eulogy, the Zelle transfers, the P.O. box, the ATM receipt time-stamped 45 minutes after our mother's stroke. No, I said. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. And that's not my fault, Derek. That's yours. I hung up. I set the phone on the table, looked out the kitchen window at the white fence and the azaleas, and the street where we grew up riding bikes and catching fireflies in mason jars. I don't owe anyone forgiveness on a timeline, but I owe my mother's safety on every single day. That line between those two things, that's my boundary. And it holds. I'm not telling you this story so you'll hate my brother. Derek is a man who lost his marriage, his kids, his job, and his self-respect in the span of 6 months. He moved into our mother's house broken and desperate, and instead of asking for help, he helped himself, to her money, to her trust, to the relationship she had with me. That doesn't make him a monster. It makes him someone who chose the wrong door when every door looked closed. I'm telling you this because I know someone watching right now is in a version of this story. Maybe you live far from your parents. Maybe a sibling moved home and slowly became the gatekeeper. Maybe you've been calling and no one's picking up. Maybe someone in your family told your mom or dad that you don't care, and they believed it. If that's you, hear me. Living far from your parents doesn't make you a bad child. Distance is not abandonment. And if someone is using your absence as a weapon against your own mother or father, that's not your shame. It's theirs. Check in, call the neighbors, call the doctor, call the bank if you have to. Ask the questions that feel uncomfortable, because the alternative, finding out 18 months too late, is worse than any awkward conversation. And if you find what you're afraid of, act. Not out of anger, not for revenge, but because the people who raised you deserve to be protected, even when the threat comes from inside the family. I lost 18 months with my mother. 18 months she spent believing I'd forgotten her. I will carry that for the rest of my life. But I won't lose another day. The hardest call I ever made wasn't to the lawyer or the bank or the DA. It was the moment I told myself, stop trusting your brother more than you trust your own instincts. Sunday afternoon, May. The kitchen smells like chicken soup, Mom's recipe, the one she taught me when I was 12. Bone broth, carrots, celery, a bay leaf, and more black pepper than any recipe calls for. She always said the secret was patience. Low and slow, Whitney. Let it do its work. Mom sits in Dad's old recliner by the window. Patty's across from her on the love seat, knitting something purple, a scarf maybe, or a very ambitious potholder. The radio on the counter is tuned to the oldies station, Frankie Valli. Mom hums along, a few beats behind. Whitney. Yeah, Mom? She waits until I look at her. The left side of her face still droops a little. Her voice is slower than it used to be, but her eyes are sharp. Soup needs more salt. I laugh, a real one, the kind that starts in your stomach and shakes your shoulders. Patty laughs too, and Mom smiles, lopsided, proud, entirely herself. I add a pinch of salt, stir the pot, look out the window above the sink. The white picket fence, the azaleas, pink and white, full bloom. My Civic parked on the street next to Patty's Subaru. The porch swing moves slightly in the breeze, the way it does when there's no one on it, but you can still feel the weight of everyone who ever sat there. Mom's bank account has $4,200 in it today. This month's pension, plus what I deposited last Friday. A long, long way from $340,000. But she's home. She's safe. She knows I never left. The soup simmers. Patty's needles click. Mom hums. And through the kitchen window, the afternoon light falls across the azaleas in long, easy gold. That's enough. For now, that's enough. That's my story. If you made it to the end, thank you. I mean that. If this story reminded you of someone in your life, or if it made you want to check on your parents, Do it today. Don't wait 18 months like I did. I want to hear from you. If you could say one thing to Derek, what would it be? Or if you've been through something like this and made it to the other side, tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone who needs it. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. I've got a few you won't want to miss. I'll see you in the next one. My name is Grace Myers. I'm 36 years old. 20 years ago, my parents kicked me out of the house for getting pregnant in 10th grade. 16 years old. November rain. One suitcase. My mother pointing at the door, telling me I was dead to them. That same night, they signed papers erasing me from the family, me and any child I might ever have. I kept those papers. I kept everything. For 2 decades, I was invisible. They told everyone I'd moved abroad, built their spotless reputation on the grave of the daughter they threw away. Then last week, they showed up at my door, desperate, smiling, demanding to meet their grandson, a grandson they'd bragged about for months to 200 of their most powerful friends. They offered me $250,000. They had no idea that the grandson they'd been promising everyone didn't exist. And what they found instead would tear apart everything they'd spent 50 years building. Portland, Oregon, November 2004. I was 16, a sophomore at St. Catherine's Academy, and the youngest child of Richard and Diane Myers. On paper, we were the perfect family. My father owned a successful real estate law practice downtown, Myers and Associates, established 1987. My mother had been president of the Parent-Teacher Association for 4 consecutive years. We sat in the front pew at Grace Fellowship Church every Sunday, dressed in coordinated outfits my mother selected each Saturday night. But every family has its hierarchy, and I learned mine early. Nathan, my older brother, was 22 and in his 3rd year of dental school. He was the pride of the family, the son who would carry on the Myers name. Carolyn, 20, was studying to become a teacher, the dutiful daughter who never questioned anything. And then there was me. I was what my mother once called the surprise. Born when she was 34, 6 years after she thought she was done having children. I don't think she ever forgave me for disrupting her plans. The signs were subtle, but constant. Family photos displayed prominently in the living room somehow never included my school portraits. Dinner conversations revolved around Nathan's clinical rotations or Carolyn's student teaching placement. When I mentioned making the honor roll, my father would nod and say, "That's nice, Grace," before turning back to Nathan. I learned to make myself small, to not ask for too much, to not need too much. My father had a saying he repeated at every family gathering: reputation takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to destroy. I didn't understand then how prophetic those words would become, or that I would be the 5 minutes he feared. I met Marcus Webb at the public library downtown. It sounds unremarkable, but for me, the library was sanctuary. A place where no one compared me to my siblings or reminded me of expectations I could never meet. I went there 3 afternoons a week, ostensibly to study, really just to breathe. Marcus attended Jefferson High, the public school my parents would never acknowledge existed. He was 17, worked part-time at his uncle's auto repair shop, and had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He found me crying in the biography section one October afternoon, after my mother had forgotten to pick me up from school for the 3rd time that month. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You okay?" No one had asked me that in a very long time. We dated secretly for 2 months. He was gentle and patient and made me feel like I mattered, like I was someone worth remembering. October 28, 2004. I'll never forget staring at that pregnancy test in the bathroom of a gas station 3 miles from my school. 2 pink lines. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I told Marcus, he didn't run. He didn't make excuses. He held my hands and said, "We'll figure this out together, Grace. You're not alone." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But I knew my parents. I knew what mattered to them. And I knew that when I told them, their first question wouldn't be, "Are you okay?" It would be, "What will people think?" I decided to tell them at Sunday dinner. I didn't know it would be the last meal I'd ever eat in that house. Sunday, November 14th, 2004, 7:32 p.m. The roast beef was overcooked. I remember that detail because I was staring at it, trying to find the courage to speak while my father complained about a property dispute and my mother calculated which families would attend the church Christmas gala. "I have something to tell you." The table went quiet. 4 faces turned toward me. My parents, Nathan home for the weekend, Carolyn visiting from college. I was 8 weeks pregnant, and I couldn't hide it much longer. "I'm pregnant." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father didn't move. "Who is the father?" His voice was ice. "Is it someone from St. Catherine's? Someone we know?" "His name is Marcus Webb. He goes to Jefferson High. He works at the public school." My mother's face had gone pale. "You've been seeing a boy from the public school." "He's a good person, Mom. Does he come from a good family?" My father cut in. "What does his father do?" "He lives with his uncle. He works at an auto shop." The silence that followed lasted exactly 11 seconds. I counted. Then my father stood. "You will not keep it." "Richard," my mother started. "She will not destroy everything we've built." He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was something that needed to be removed. "If you keep that baby, you are no longer part of this family." By 9:15 p.m., I was standing on the front porch with one suitcase, rain soaking through my sweater. My mother had opened the door and pointed outside. Not my father. My mother. Nathan and Carolyn watched from the upstairs window. Neither of them came down. I called Marcus from a payphone at the gas station on Mulberry Street. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. He picked up on the second ring. "Grace, what's wrong?" "They kicked me out." 20 minutes later, his uncle's truck pulled up to the gas station. Marcus jumped out before it fully stopped, wrapped me in his jacket, and held me while I sobbed against his chest. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you." We didn't have a plan. We had $300 between us, a truck with questionable brakes, and nowhere to go. That's when Margaret Torres saved my life. She was our neighbor, 3 houses down from the Myers residence, 62 years old, retired schoolteacher, the only person on our street who didn't treat my father like he owned the neighborhood. She'd seen me standing in the rain from her window. She'd watched long enough to understand. "You can stay with me," she said when I knocked on her door at nearly 10 o'clock at night. "As long as you need." 2 weeks. That's how long we stayed in Mrs. Torres's guest room before Marcus found us a studio apartment in Seattle, $425 a month, above a laundromat that smelled like bleach and secondhand hope. My parents had their lawyer draw up papers the night they threw me out. I know because my father mailed me a copy 3 days later. Certified mail, signature required, like I was a business transaction. The document stated that Grace Elizabeth Myers forfeited all inheritance rights, and the Myers family bore no legal or moral obligation to her or any child born to her. I kept that paper. I've kept it for 20 years. Lily Grace Myers Webb was born on July 6, 2005, at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Her father's brown eyes and my stubborn chin. She came into the world screaming, and I thought, good, scream. Make them hear you. Don't ever let anyone make you small. The first 5 years were a blur of survival. Marcus worked double shifts at a repair shop in Ballard while I finished my GED, then started community college classes. 2 at a time, whatever I could manage around Lily's schedule. We lived on ramen noodles and free bread from the day-old bin at the bakery down the street. I learned to sew patches onto patches, to make a dollar stretch until it begged for mercy. I sent my parents a birth announcement when Lily was born. No response. I sent a photo on her first birthday. Silence. By her second birthday, I stopped trying. Marcus and I never got married. We kept saying we would someday, when we had money for a real wedding, when life calmed down. Someday kept getting pushed back. Then, on March 15, 2010, a delivery truck ran a red light on Aurora Avenue. Marcus was driving home from a night shift. The police officer who came to my door said he died on impact. He was 26 years old. Lily was 4. The life insurance policy Marcus had through work paid out $12,000. That was it. $12,000 for 26 years of a good man's life. I was 22 years old, a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter, $12,000, and absolutely no one to call. I could have given up then. I didn't. I'd started doing small interior design projects while Marcus was alive, decorating apartments for neighbors who couldn't afford professionals, staging homes for real estate agents willing to take a chance on a young mother with no credentials. I had an eye for it, people said. A gift for making small spaces feel like home. After Marcus died, I threw myself into that work like my life depended on it, because it did. 2012. I met Eleanor Vance at a design workshop at Seattle Central College. She was 52, recently retired as creative director of a major design firm, and looking for a project. For reasons I still don't fully understand, she chose me. "You have talent," she said after reviewing my portfolio. "Raw, unpolished but real. Let me help you shape it." 2014. With Eleanor's mentorship and a $50,000 SBA loan that took me 3 attempts to secure, I founded Hearth and Home Interiors. Our first office was a converted closet in a shared workspace. 2018. 8 employees. Revenue, $1.2 million. 2022. Seattle Met Magazine ran a feature story on me. From teen mom to design CEO, Grace Myers' story. The journalist spent 3 days interviewing me about my journey, the pregnancy at 16, being cut off from my family, losing Marcus, building a business from nothing. I told her everything except my parents' names, not to protect them, to protect Lily from anyone who might try to connect her to people who never wanted her to exist. 2024. 22 employees. Revenue, $4.2 million. A corner office overlooking Capitol Hill. My daughter was 19, a sophomore at the University of Washington, majoring in psychology. She was brilliant and fierce and everything I'd hoped she would become. 20 years, no contact from the Myers family. Until last week. Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. 6:47 p.m. I'd just gotten home from a client meeting. A tech executive renovating her Mercer Island waterfront property. A contract worth $800,000. My mind was still running through fabric samples and lighting options when I turned onto my street and saw the car. A black Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Oregon plates. My heart stopped. I parked in my driveway and sat there for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, watching 2 figures standing at my front door. The man had gray hair now, stooped shoulders. The woman still held herself with that rigid posture I remembered, that constant vigilance against anything that might disturb her carefully constructed world. Richard and Diane Myers. My parents. I hadn't seen them in 20 years. I considered driving away, going to a hotel, calling Lily, pretending this wasn't happening. But I was 36 years old. I owned a company. I had built a life without them. I would not run. I got out of my car and walked toward them. My father spoke first. "Grace, you look..." He paused, scanning me, my designer coat, my leather bag, my house. "Well, what are you doing here?" My mother stepped forward. Her face had more lines now, her hair a careful shade of ash blonde that didn't quite match her age. "We know about your son, Grace. We know you have a son." I stared at her. "We'd like to meet him," my father added. "We'd like to reconnect, as a family." The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. 20 years of silence. 20 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now, they were standing on my porch, asking to meet a grandson they'd never bothered to know. A grandson who didn't exist. I let them into my house. I still don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear what 20 years of silence had led to. My father sat in my living room like he was evaluating a property for purchase, assessing the hardwood floors, the custom built-in shelves, the original artwork on the walls. My mother perched on the edge of my sofa, hands folded, spine straight. "Your anniversary," I said. "That's why you're here." 50 years. My father almost smiled. November 15th. We're hosting a celebration at the Heathman Hotel. 200 guests. The mayor will be there, Pastor Harrison, the Rotary Club board. What does that have to do with me? My mother exchanged a glance with my father. There have been questions, Grace, about you, about what happened 20 years ago. People talk, my father added. Some people remember that we had a third child. They've asked where you are, what happened to you. We've always said you moved away, went abroad, but lately, questions have become more persistent. So you need me to make an appearance. Show everyone that the Myers family is whole and happy. We need your son. My mother's voice was firm. We've told people about him, about our grandson. He should be there, representing the next generation of the Myers family. The room went very still. Who told you I have a son? We read that article. My father waved his hand dismissively. The magazine piece. It mentioned your child, your successful business. You've done better than we expected, better than we expected. As if I'd been graded, as if my entire life was a test I might have failed. And if I refuse? My father's jaw tightened. Let's not make this difficult, Grace. My father reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew a blank check. The sight of it made my stomach turn. We're prepared to compensate you, he said, placing it on my coffee table. $250,000. You bring your son to the party, stay for 3 hours, take some family photos. Then you can return to your life. I looked at the check, then at my mother, who was nodding as if this were the most reasonable proposition in the world. $250,000, I repeated. Is that what 20 years of silence costs? We're also prepared to reinstate you in the family trust. My mother leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The combined estate is valued at $3.8 million. You would have an equal share with Nathan and Carolyn. I thought about that studio apartment above the laundromat. The nights I'd worked double shifts while Lily slept in a playpen behind the counter of a coffee shop because I couldn't afford childcare. The years I'd spent building something from nothing while they sat in their Portland mansion, pretending I'd never existed. And if I say no? My father's expression hardened. We would prefer not to involve your son directly, Grace, but if necessary, we can reach out to him ourselves, explain the situation, help him understand his family history. It was a threat, subtle but unmistakable. You want to contact my child, I said slowly, and tell them your version of what happened. We want to be a family again. My mother spread her hands, the picture of reasonableness. Isn't that what you've always wanted? I was about to answer when I heard footsteps on the stairs, and everything changed. Mom? Is everything okay? I heard voices. Lily stopped at the bottom of the stairs, her psychology textbook still in her hand. She was wearing sweatpants and a University of Washington hoodie, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked exactly like what she was, a 19-year-old college student who'd been studying in her room. My mother rose to her feet, her face cycling through confusion, calculation, and something close to horror. Who is this? This is Lily. I stood, positioning myself slightly between my daughter and my parents. My daughter, your granddaughter. Daughter? My father's voice cracked. But we were told, the article said child. You assumed the rest. Lily's gaze moved from me to the strangers in our living room. Understanding dawned in her eyes. These are them? The grandparents who threw you out when you were pregnant with me? My mother flinched. That's not... It was more complicated than... Which part was complicated? Lily crossed her arms. The part where you kicked a 16-year-old out in the rain? Or the part where you spent 20 years pretending she didn't exist? Young lady, my father started. I'm not your young lady. I'm the grandchild you never wanted to meet, the one you tried to make disappear. Lily's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. I know everything. Mom never hid it from me. I know about the letter. I know about the inheritance papers. I know you told your friends she went abroad. My parents sat in stunned silence. Lily looked at me. They came here for a grandson, didn't they? Someone they could show off. Yes. She turned back to them with a cold smile. Surprise. My father recovered faster than my mother. I watched him recalibrate, the lawyer in him assessing this new variable. A granddaughter, he said carefully. That works. We can adjust the narrative. Lily can come to the party as what? Lily cut in. The secret granddaughter you've been hiding for 19 years? The daughter of the teen mom you threw away? We could say you were studying abroad. My mother's voice was pleading now. Recently returned. A surprise reunion. I was born in Seattle. I've never left the country. I'm a sophomore at UW. Lily laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you even hear yourselves? You want me to lie to 200 people about my entire existence? The party is November 15th. My father checked his watch, as if time was the only variable that mattered. 10 days from now. We need an answer by the 10th. I stood. I think you should leave. Grace, I'll consider what you've said, but not tonight. Not with Lily here. My mother rose, gathering her handbag. At the door, she turned back. This is an opportunity to heal, Grace. To put the past behind us. Don't let old wounds cost you your future. I watched them walk to their Mercedes. Watched my father help my mother into the passenger seat, the same way he had 1,000 times before, as if this were any ordinary evening. When the car disappeared around the corner, Lily spoke. You're not actually considering this, are you? I looked at my daughter, this fierce, brilliant young woman I'd raised alone. The person Richard and Diane Myers had tried to erase from existence before she was even born. No, I said, but I'm not done with them yet. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood where I stood that night, facing people who abandoned you, only to return when they needed something? I'd love to know what you would have done in my position. Drop a comment below, and if you want to see how this all unfolds, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next? Even I didn't see it coming. That night, after Lily went to bed, I pulled a fireproof lockbox from the back of my closet. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the documents of my erasure. The notarized letter of disinheritance, dated November 14th, 2004, signed by Richard Allen Myers and Diane Elizabeth Myers, witnessed by a notary named Harold Brennan. I remembered the day my father mailed it to me, certified mail, requiring my signature, as if he wanted to make sure I knew exactly how thorough he'd been. The document was 3 pages, legal language designed to be airtight, ensuring that Grace Elizabeth Myers hereby forfeits all claims to the Myers family estate, and that the family bears no legal or moral obligation to the aforementioned party or any dependents thereof. Any dependents thereof. Lily, reduced to 3 words in a legal document, erased before she took her first breath. I photographed each page with my phone, uploaded them to my cloud storage, made backup copies. Mom? I looked up. Lily was standing in my doorway, arms wrapped around herself. I couldn't sleep either. She sat beside me on the bed, looking at the documents spread across my comforter. Is that the letter? Yes. She picked up the first page, reading slowly. When she finished, her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. They really did it, she whispered. They really just cut you out, like you were nothing. They did. What are you going to do with these? I looked at my daughter. at the evidence of 20 years of calculated cruelty laid out before us. I don't know yet, I admitted, but whatever I do, they won't be able to pretend anymore. Lily nodded slowly. I might have an idea. The next morning, I made a call I hadn't made in over a year. Margaret Torres answered on the third ring. Grace, is that you, sweetheart? Mrs. Torres, I smiled despite everything. I hope I'm not calling too early. At my age, early is relative. What's wrong? You sound like you've got weight on your shoulders. I told her about my parents' visit, about the grandson they'd invented, the anniversary party, the $250,000. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. Those people, she finally said. 20 years, and they haven't changed one bit. Mrs. Torres, I need to ask you something. That night, November 14th, 2004, I remember it like it was yesterday. Her voice hardened. I watched from my window, saw you standing in the rain, that little suitcase at your feet, watched your parents' car drive away. I should have come out sooner. I've regretted that every day since. Do you still have your security camera footage from back then? A pause. You know, I never delete anything. Old teacher's habit. Document everything. Let me check my files. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email. A grainy but unmistakable image. A 16-year-old girl standing on a porch in the rain, 9:17 p.m., November 14th, 2004. The timestamp was visible in the corner. The address, my parents' house, was partially visible in the frame. That's you, Mrs. Torres said when I called her back. That's the night they threw you away. Would you be willing to verify this? Officially, if needed? Honey, I've been waiting 20 years for someone to ask. Her voice was fierce. Whatever you need, I'm there. I thanked her and hung up. 2 pieces of evidence, 2 witnesses. Now I needed a plan. I spent that evening rereading my own story. The Seattle Met article was still available online, shared over 12,000 times since it was published in March 2022. The journalist, Rebecca Huang, had titled it, From Teen Mom to Design CEO, Grace Myers' Story. 2,500 words about loss, resilience, and building something from the ruins of everything you thought you knew. I'd been careful in that interview. I'd told the truth but not the whole truth. I mentioned being estranged from my family without naming names or cities. I talked about becoming a mother at 17 without identifying the parents who'd cast me out. Not to protect them. To protect Lily from strangers making connections, asking questions, dredging up pain that didn't belong to them. Now I scrolled through the comments, thousands of them. This woman is incredible. Imagine being thrown away by your own family and still becoming this successful. I went through something similar. This story gives me hope. Someone should make a movie about her life. Seriously. One comment caught my eye, posted just 2 weeks ago. Does anyone know if she's related to the Myers family in Portland? The law firm people? Someone in my church mentioned it, and now I'm curious. So that's how my parents found out. My phone rang. Eleanor Vance. Grace, I heard through the grapevine that your parents materialized after 2 decades of radio silence. I laughed despite myself. News travels fast. This is Seattle. Everything travels fast. Her voice softened. What do you need? I don't know yet. Advice, maybe? Perspective. What I know, Eleanor said, is that you've spent 20 years proving who you are without them. Don't let 3 hours at their party undo that. She was right. But I was already thinking bigger than 3 hours. Thursday, November 7th, 2024. 3:42 p.m. My phone showed an Oregon area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Grace, it's Nathan. I hadn't heard my brother's voice in 20 years. It was deeper now, weathered. The voice of a man in his 40s instead of the 22-year-old who'd watched from an upstairs window while I stood in the rain. Nathan, I know I have no right to call. I know you have no reason to talk to me. He exhaled shakily. But I need you to know some things before before whatever happens next. Then talk. The grandson story. The whole thing about you having a son. That came from Mom. She read the Seattle Met article 2 years ago but didn't read it carefully. Just saw child and successful business, and constructed this whole narrative about you having a boy who was some kind of entrepreneur. She invented a grandson. She told her church friends, her Rotary friends, built an entire story about this brilliant young man continuing the Myers legacy. Nathan's voice cracked. Dad went along with it. They've been dining out on your imaginary son for months. I closed my eyes. Even now, even after everything, my parents' capacity for delusion still stunned me. Why are you telling me this? Because I was a coward, Grace. 20 years ago, I should have come downstairs. I should have said something. I should have... He stopped, breathing hard. Carolyn and I have talked about it. For years. We were wrong. We've always been wrong. And now? Now I want to make it right, whatever that looks like. Nathan paused. The anniversary party. Carolyn and I will be there. If you decide to come, you won't be alone. I didn't know what to say to that. Nathan talked for another hour. He told me about the unwritten rules of being a Myers child, the expectations, the constant performance, the way our parents wielded approval like a weapon, granting it to those who complied and withdrawing it from anyone who stepped out of line. Carolyn has 2 kids, he said. 8 and 11. She's terrified of them growing up the way we did, walking on eggshells, never knowing if they're good enough. Why didn't you ever reach out? In 20 years? Long pause. I almost did. 5 years ago. I had your number, found it through the business website, dialed it at least a dozen times. His voice dropped. And every time, I hung up before it connected, because I knew that if I talked to you, I'd have to admit what I let happen. And I wasn't ready. What changed? Seeing them show up at your door demanding a grandson that doesn't exist, watching them try to buy you like you're a prop for their anniversary photo. Nathan exhaled. It made me realize, if I don't say something now, I never will, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I failed you twice. I thought about the brother I remembered, the one who played board games with me when our parents were at their charity galas, the one who taught me to ride a bike in the backyard. There's something you should know, Nathan added. The anniversary party. There's going to be a family moment that gets live-streamed on the church Facebook page. Pastor Harrison's idea. A show of unity for the congregation. A live stream, 200 witnesses in person, and who knew how many more watching online. Thank you for telling me, Nathan. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting to see it clearly. Friday, November 8th, 2024, 10:14 a.m. My father called directly this time. No preamble. Grace, we're running out of time. The party is in 1 week. $250,000, full reinstatement in the family trust. Final offer. I've been talking to Nathan. Silence. He told me about the grandson story you've been telling people. The one you made up based on an article you didn't bother to read carefully. That's not... We may have embellished slightly. You invented an entire person. You've been telling your friends about your successful grandson for months. A grandson that doesn't exist. Grace. My father's voice hardened. I don't appreciate your tone. After everything we're offering. What exactly are you offering? Money to make me perform for your friends? A spot in a trust you used to erase me? I kept my voice calm, steady. You're not offering me anything. You're trying to buy your way out of a lie you created. You have no right to judge us. Now he was angry. You're the one who destroyed this family. You're the one who brought shame. I was 16 years old. I was pregnant and scared, and I needed my parents. My grip tightened on the phone. And you threw me out like garbage and spent 20 years pretending I died. If you don't come to this party, Grace, you will never have another opportunity to be part of this family. You said that 20 years ago. And you know what? I built a better life without you than I ever would have had with you. We'll see about that. He hung up. I sat in my office, heart pounding, mind racing. 1 week, 200 guests, one live stream. It was time to stop letting them control the narrative. That evening, I sat at my dining table with Lily and Eleanor. "They want a performance," Eleanor said, swirling her wine. "They want you to show up, smile for the cameras, validate 20 years of lies." "They want to use you," Lily added, "the same way they've always used you, as something to manage, not someone to love." I looked at both of them, my mentor, my daughter, the family I'd built for myself. "I'm going to that party." Lily's head snapped up. "Mom!" "Not to give them what they want, to give myself what I need." I pulled out my phone, showing them the photos of the disinheritance letter, Mrs. Torres's security footage, the Seattle Met article. "They've spent 20 years controlling my story, telling people I went abroad, inventing a grandson, making me disappear." "And you want to undisappear," Eleanor said slowly. "I want to tell the truth, in front of everyone who matters to them, on their stage, at their party, during their precious live stream." I took a breath. Not to humiliate them, but to stop letting them pretend I don't exist. "I'm coming with you." Lily's voice was firm. "They need to see who I really am, not their imaginary grandson, me." I reached for her hand. "Are you sure this could be?" "I've spent my whole life knowing that my grandparents chose their reputation over my existence, I'm sure." I called Nathan that night. "Your offer to stand with me, does it still hold?" "Carolyn and I talked. We're ready." "Then I need you to do something. Don't warn Mom and Dad. Don't tell them I'm coming. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." I looked out at the Seattle skyline, at the life I'd built from nothing. "Because in 1 week, we're going to show them what family actually means." Saturday, November 15th, 2024, 6:47 p.m. The Crystal Ballroom at the Heathman Hotel was everything my parents would have chosen. Chandeliers dripping crystal, white tablecloths starched to precision, flower arrangements that probably cost more than my first month's rent in Seattle. 200 guests in formal attire, clutching champagne flutes, making small talk about golf handicaps and investment portfolios. I stood in the entrance with Lily beside me. She wore a navy blue dress, simple and elegant. I'd chosen black, professional, understated, impossible to ignore. "You okay?" she whispered. "I'm about to crash my parents' 50th anniversary party to tell 200 people they've been lying for 20 years. I squeezed her hand. "I'm terrified." "That's not what I asked." I looked at her, this incredible young woman who'd grown up knowing her grandparents had tried to erase her, who'd built her own strength from that knowledge, instead of letting it break her. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." We walked in. The room was arranged around a raised platform at the far end, where my parents would give their speeches. A camera crew was setting up, the live stream for Grace Fellowship Church. I could see the Facebook Live indicator already blinking. And there they were. Richard and Diane Myers, standing on that stage, surrounded by well-wishers. My mother in champagne-colored silk. My father in a tailored navy suit. Both of them glowing with the confidence of people who believed they'd won. They hadn't noticed us yet. The room was too crowded, the attention too focused on them. But heads were starting to turn. Someone near the door whispered, "Is that?" Someone else. "The daughter from the article." The whispers spread like ripples in water. And then my mother looked up. My father had just begun his speech. 50 years of marriage has taught me that family is everything. Diane and I have built our lives around that principle. Our children, our community, our faith. His voice carried across the ballroom, amplified by the microphone, captured by the live stream camera. 200 faces watched adoringly. On the small monitor near the stage, I could see the Facebook Live comment section scrolling. "Beautiful couple. God bless the Myers family. What an inspiration." My mother saw me first. Her champagne smile froze. I watched her hand tighten on my father's arm. He followed her gaze. stopped mid-sentence. The room began to notice. Heads turning, whispers building. Someone near the back said, loud enough to carry, "That's her. From the magazine, the design CEO." Someone else, "That's Richard's daughter? I thought she was in Europe." My father recovered first. As I was saying, family has always... I started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted. Not dramatically, this wasn't a movie, but people stepped aside, sensing something was about to happen. Lily walked beside me, her chin high, her steps steady. Nathan appeared at the edge of the crowd. Carolyn beside him. They didn't try to stop me, they just watched. "Grace!" My father's voice came through the speakers, strained now. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting." I climbed the 3 steps to the platform. The live stream camera tracked my movement. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, plus however many were watching online. "Hello, Dad?" I took the microphone from his hand before he could react. "Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Myers. For those of you who don't know me, and many of you don't, I'm Richard and Diane's youngest daughter." I paused. "The one they told you went to Europe 20 years ago." The silence in that ballroom was absolute. "I didn't go to Europe," I continued. "On November 14th, 2004, 20 years ago tomorrow, my parents discovered I was pregnant at 16. That same night, they threw me out of their house. They had their lawyer draft papers disowning me. They told me I was dead to them." Someone gasped. The live stream comments were exploding. I could see them scrolling faster than anyone could read. "They told everyone I'd gone abroad. For 20 years they pretended I didn't exist." I reached into my bag and pulled out the notarized letter. "This is the document my father mailed me 3 days after throwing me out. It states that I forfeit all inheritance rights, and that the Myers family has no obligation to me or, I quote, any dependents thereof." I held it up to the camera, close enough to read. "Those dependents? That's my daughter Lily." I gestured to where she stood at the edge of the stage. "Your granddaughter, who you've never met. The grandson you've been telling your friends about for months doesn't exist. You invented him based on a magazine article you didn't read carefully." My father grabbed for the microphone. "Grace, this isn't the place." "When is the place, Dad?" I held the mic out of his reach. "When is the right time to tell the truth? You came to my house last week offering me $250,000 to parade a fictional grandson at this party. $250,000 to make your lie look real." I turned to the crowd, to the camera, to the 200 witnesses and the thousands watching online. "I didn't come here for money. I came here because I'm done being erased." Pastor Harrison stepped forward. "Richard, is this true?" My father couldn't answer. My mother started crying. I'd only seen Diane Myers cry once in my entire childhood, at her own mother's funeral. Now tears streamed down her face, ruining the careful makeup she'd spent hours perfecting. "Richard," Pastor Harrison's voice was firm, "I asked you a question. Is what your daughter is saying true?" The room held its breath. My father looked at the crowd, the mayor, the Rotary Club board members, the church elders who had respected him for decades. I watched him calculate, search for an angle, try to find words that would spin this into something acceptable. He couldn't find them. "It was a difficult time," he finally said. "We made decisions that... You threw me out because I was pregnant." My voice stayed calm. "Because your reputation mattered more than your child." Nathan stepped onto the stage, then Carolyn. They stood beside me, not touching, but present. "She's telling the truth," Nathan said, his voice carrying through the room. Carolyn and I were there that night. We watched from the window while our parents put our 16-year-old sister out in the rain. We never said anything. That was our failure. The whispers became a roar. I could see people pulling out phones, texting, recording. The mayor, Harold Simmons, was already moving toward the exit. "Mrs. Torres," I said, pointing to a gray-haired woman in the back row who had flown in from Portland that morning. "Our neighbor from 20 years ago. She saw everything. She has photos, timestamps." Maggie Torres stood, her chin lifted. I watched that child stand in the rain for 10 minutes before she walked away. I gave her a place to sleep. The Myers family never once asked where she went. The livestream comments exploded. This is insane. Those poor girls. Someone call the news. Can you imagine standing where my parents stood in that moment? Everything they'd built, 50 years of reputation, the respect of their community, the image they'd polished so carefully, crumbling in 3 minutes of truth. Hit that like button if you think they deserved it. And keep watching, because what happened next surprised even me. I handed the microphone back to my father. He took it reflexively, like a man in shock. I didn't come here to destroy you, I said, quietly enough that only those on stage could hear. I came here to stop being invisible. Then I turned back to the crowd and raised my voice. I'm not asking for your pity. I don't need it. 20 years ago, I was thrown out with nothing. Today, I own a design company in Seattle with 22 employees and over $4 million in annual revenue. My daughter is a sophomore at the University of Washington. We built our lives without the Myers family's help. I looked directly at the camera. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because my parents tried to buy my silence last week. $250,000 to pretend their lies were true. I'm here because they deserve to face the consequences of what they did. Not in private. In front of the community they value more than their own children. Lily climbed onto the stage and took my hand. I'm Lily, she said into the microphone. The granddaughter they never wanted. I'm 19 years old. I've known my whole life that my grandparents chose their reputation over my mother, and by extension, over me. She looked at Richard and Diane. You could have known me. You could have watched me grow up. You could have been at my birthday parties, my school plays, my high school graduation. Her voice cracked. You chose not to, and now you don't get to pretend that was ever our fault. Lily handed back the microphone and walked off the stage. I followed her. Behind us, the crystal ballroom erupted into chaos. At the ballroom door, I turned back one last time. One more thing. My voice cut through the chaos. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to contest the will or demand money. The disinheritance papers you signed 20 years ago, I'm keeping them, as a reminder of who you really are, not as a weapon. Richard looked up, something like confusion crossing his face. He'd expected a battle, a lawsuit, demands. But understand this. If you ever spread lies about me or my daughter again, if you ever try to contact Lily without her consent, or spin some new story about us for your friends, I will make every document I have public. I have the disinheritance letter. I have time-stamped photos. I have witnesses. I nodded toward Mrs. Torres. And now I have 200 witnesses to this conversation. Eleanor Vance appeared at my elbow. Ready? Yes. As we walked through the doors, I heard Pastor Harrison's voice. Richard, Diane, I think we need to talk. Privately. Tonight. Lily squeezed my hand as we stepped into the November evening. The air was cold and clean, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I could breathe. Mom, her voice was small. Did we do the right thing? I thought about 16-year-old Grace, standing in the rain with a suitcase and a baby she hadn't planned for. I thought about all the years of building, surviving, fighting to become someone worth being. We told the truth, I said. We set a boundary. We let them face the consequences of their own choices. I pulled her into a hug. That's not revenge. That's justice. What happens now? I looked up at the night sky. Now we go home. The fallout began within hours. By midnight, the livestream clip had been shared 847 times. By morning, that number had tripled. Someone had titled it, Woman Exposes Parents' 20-Year Lie at Their Anniversary Party, and uploaded it to YouTube, where it accumulated 40,000 views in the first 24 hours. 47 guests left the party within 30 minutes of my departure. I learned this from Nathan, who called me Sunday morning with a full report. Mayor Simmons walked out without saying goodbye to Dad. Mrs. Patterson from the church board followed him. The Hendersons, you remember them, they own the chain of auto dealerships. They actually apologized to me on their way out. Apologized? For never asking where you were. for just accepting the story. Sunday afternoon, a short item appeared in the Portland Herald. Local attorney's anniversary gala ends in family revelation. The article was carefully neutral, but the comments section was not. I went to church with these people. I had no idea. Richard Myers drew up my will. What kind of man throws out his own child? Anyone who watched that live stream will never see that family the same way. By Monday, Richard had resigned his position as elder at Grace Fellowship Church. For personal reasons, the church bulletin stated. But everyone knew. By Wednesday, the Rotary Club board announced they would be reviewing membership criteria at their next meeting. Richard's name was specifically mentioned. And through it all, I was in Seattle, answering emails from potential clients. 7 new inquiries came in that week. People who'd seen the Seattle Met article 2 years ago and had just connected it to the viral video. Some fallouts destroy, others clarify. Mine did both. The following Thursday, a reporter from Seattle Met called. Rebecca Huang, the same journalist who'd written my profile 2 years earlier. Grace, I don't know if you've seen, but your video is everywhere. We'd love to do a follow-up piece, the CEO who confronted her past. What do you think? I thought about it. Let me get back to you. Of course, just know, the response has been overwhelming. People are connecting with your story, a lot of them have similar experiences. She wasn't wrong. My company's general inbox was flooded with messages. Not about design, about family, about being cut off, about spending years feeling invisible and finally finding the courage to speak. Your video made me call my brother for the first time in 12 years. I'm a teen mom too. You gave me hope. Thank you for showing that success is the best response to people who tried to destroy you. Saturday, I flew to Seattle for Nathan and Carolyn's first visit to my home in 20 years. We sat in my living room, the same room where our parents had tried to buy my silence 2 weeks earlier, and talked for 6 hours. Nathan told me about the years of guilt. Carolyn cried when she met Lily for the first time. Their children, my niece and nephew, ages 8 and 11, played in my backyard while the adults tried to rebuild something from the wreckage. I'm sorry, Nathan said. I know it's not enough. I know sorry doesn't cover 20 years. No, I agreed. It doesn't, but it's a start. Lily watched from the doorway, this young woman who'd grown up without extended family, finally seeing what it might look like to have one. Imperfect, complicated, but real. 1 week after the party, my phone rang with an Oregon number. My mother. Grace? Her voice was hoarse, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm not calling to apologize. I don't know how to apologize for what we did. Then why are you calling? Long silence. I watched the video. The live stream. I've watched it 11 times. Another pause. I keep looking at your face when you're talking, trying to see my daughter, the one I put out in the rain. I said nothing. Your father is... She trailed off. He's not doing well. The church, the Rotary, his colleagues. Everyone is looking at him differently now. He doesn't know how to handle it. I didn't do this to punish him, or you. I know that now. Her voice cracked. You did it because you had to stop pretending. You did it because we gave you no other choice. Why did you call, Mom? The longest silence yet. Because I wanted to hear your voice. Because I haven't heard it in 20 years, and I realized I might never hear it again. She was crying now. Because my granddaughter stood on that stage and told 200 people she'd spent her whole life knowing we didn't want her, and I couldn't breathe. I closed my eyes. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said. I might never be, but I'm not going to hang up on you either. That's more than I deserve. Yes, it is. We stayed on the line for another minute, not speaking. Then she said goodbye. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't demand anything. Maybe that was progress. Or maybe it was just the first step of a very long road. Thanksgiving, 2024. My dining table, the one I'd bought 3 years ago from an estate sale and refinished myself, seated 12. It had never been this full. Lily sat at my right hand, Eleanor Vance at my left. Mrs. Torres, who'd flown up from Portland again, was teaching my nephew how to fold napkins into swans. Nathan carved the turkey while his wife set out side dishes. Carolyn's daughters were arguing about who got to light the candles. My parents weren't there. We hadn't reached that point. Maybe we never would. But looking around that table, I realized something. I'd spent 20 years mourning a family that had never really wanted me. Now I was surrounded by people who'd chosen to be here, who wanted to know me, not a version of me, not a prop for their image, but me. Lily stood to make a toast. I wrote something, for Mom. She pulled out a folded paper. When I was little, I used to ask why I didn't have grandparents like the other kids. Mom always told me the truth, that they'd made a choice, and that choice wasn't about me. It took me years to really understand that. She looked at me. But I understand now. And I know that everything I have, everything I am, is because you never let their choice define us. She raised her glass. To the family we build, not the one we're born into. Everyone drank. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the guests were scattered through my house drinking coffee, I stood at the kitchen window. Lily appeared beside me. "You okay?" I looked at my daughter. At this life I'd assembled from the ruins of everything I thought I'd lost. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." If you're still listening, let me leave you with this. 20 years ago, I was a scared 16-year-old standing in the rain, watching my parents' taillights disappear down the street. I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left. I was wrong. I had Marcus for as long as I could have him. I had Mrs. Torres, who opened her door when she didn't have to. I had Eleanor, who saw potential in a young mother with nothing but determination. I had Lily, who grew up knowing the truth and chose to be fierce instead of bitter. And eventually, I had myself. The version of me who stopped asking for permission to exist. If you're in a situation where your family makes you feel like you need to shrink yourself to be acceptable, like your worth depends on their approval, I understand. I've been there. But here's what I know now. You don't need their validation to know your value. Setting boundaries isn't revenge, it's survival. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you were born into. My parents still haven't apologized. Not really. Richard has barely spoken since the party. Diane calls occasionally, and I answer when I can. Nathan and Carolyn are trying. We're all trying. But I'm not waiting for them to change. I'm living my life. The one I built, the one I earned, the one that belongs entirely to me. That's not a happy ending, it's a real one. And real endings? They don't need applause. They just need truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, if it made you feel less alone, please share it. Like, subscribe, and check the description for more stories like this one. Because everyone deserves to be seen, even the ones they tried to make invisible. My name is Meredith Fisher, and at 33 I had designed data systems that processed 400 million transactions a day across 9 states. My brother called me the family failure. He said it at his own wedding, in front of 200 guests, standing next to the bride's multimillionaire father. My parents backed him up. My mother added her favorite line, the one she'd been polishing for years. And the man Liam was trying so hard to impress looked at me, went still, and said 5 words that cracked the evening wide open. What happened after that? What it cost Liam? What it cost my parents? What it finally gave me permission to stop caring? None of them saw coming. I barely did either. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. Quiet stories about ordinary women, impossible families, and the moment the truth finally stands up on its own. If you've ever been the one nobody bragged about, this one's for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me take you back to where it started. 6 weeks before the wedding, on a Tuesday night in March, I was sitting in my apartment in Charlotte eating leftover soup when my phone buzzed with a notification from a group chat I'd been removed from 3 weeks earlier. The Fisher fam chat. They'd added me back. Not to catch up. Not to apologize. The message from my brother read, "Are you coming or not? Don't make it weird." I hadn't been in the Fisher fam chat since early February. My mother created it 4 years ago, back when Liam launched his startup and suddenly needed a family audience for every milestone photo, every press mention, every round of applause he could manufacture from people who shared his last name. The chat had 312 unread messages when I was removed. I only noticed because the notification badge disappeared. Nobody told me. Nobody had to. I scrolled through Liam's message now. Below it, my mother had typed, "Meredith, please just confirm. Sienna's family is very particular about headcounts. Sienna Calloway, Liam's fiancée, daughter of Gerald Calloway, the venture capital investor whose fund had reportedly backed 14 companies in the last 3 years, all of them in data infrastructure." I knew the name because everyone in my industry did. Callaway Ventures was one of the firms that licensed infrastructure built on systems I had helped architect at Halcyon. I didn't think about that connection then. I was too busy reading the next message. From my father. Roger Fisher, a man who communicated almost exclusively through silence, had typed a single line. "It would mean a lot, Mur." That was the most my father had said to me in a text in 2 years. I put the phone down, picked up my soup. The broth had gone cold. Here is what you need to understand about the Fisher family. We had one success story, and it wasn't me. It was Liam. Liam, who dropped out of a business program to launch Viridia, a data intelligence startup that had raised $11 million and landed on 3 companies to watch lists before his 30th birthday. And me? I was the daughter who built things nobody in my family could see. The last time I went home for dinner was in January. My mother had invited the Pattersons from next door. Nice people, retired, the kind who ask polite questions and actually listen to the answers. Mrs. Patterson asked what I did for work. Before I could open my mouth, my mother waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Oh, Meredith does computer things, databases or something." She turned to Mrs. Patterson with a smile that had been rehearsed in front of a bathroom mirror. "We don't brag about her." She said it lightly, the way you'd say you don't keep dessert in the house. A fact of life. A household policy. Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. My father studied his pot roast. Liam, who had driven up from Raleigh for the weekend in a leased Audi, leaned back in his chair and grinned. The rest of the dinner was about Viridia. My mother recited Liam's accomplishments the way a docent walks you through a museum. The angel round. The partnerships. The office space in the research triangle. She left out the part where my parents had pulled $140,000 from their retirement savings to fund his Series A shortfall. I knew about it because my father had mentioned it once, in a phone call so quiet I thought the line had dropped. "We believe in him, Mur," he'd said. "Your mother and I. We put in what we had." $140,000. 31 years of a middle school principal's pension contributions and a dental hygienist's overtime pay, converted into equity in a company my brother ran and my mother narrated. I didn't argue. I never did. That was my problem. Not that I trusted them, but that I had stopped expecting anything from them a long time ago. At Halcyon Systems, I was a senior data systems architect. I had been there 6 years. The system I built, Cascade, was a real-time data orchestration engine that handled pipeline routing for enterprise clients across financial services, logistics, and healthcare. If you have ever swiped a debit card at a grocery store in the southeastern United States, there is a reasonable chance my architecture touched that transaction. Nobody at Halcyon called me a failure. My colleague Nora used to joke that I was the ghost who built the spine of this place. I designed the bones. Other people got to walk around in the body. That spring, Halcyon's CTO forwarded me an invitation to speak at a regional infrastructure summit in Atlanta. My name was listed on the program alongside 2 patents I'd co-authored and a keynote panel on scalable data pipeline architecture. I almost declined. I usually did. Not because I couldn't speak in public. I'd done it a dozen times. But because I had grown so used to being invisible that visibility felt like standing in the wrong lane of traffic. Professional isolation. That's what my therapist called it. She said I had organized my entire life around being competent and unseen, and that both of those things were costing me something I hadn't calculated yet. I told her I'd think about it. Then I went back to my desk and optimized a failover protocol that saved Halcyon's biggest client 6 hours of downtime during a system migration. Nobody sent me flowers. Nobody posted about it in a group chat. But when I pulled up the diagnostics the next morning and saw 0 failed transactions across 9 routing nodes, I felt the quiet satisfaction that only people who build things for a living understand. That was enough. Or I had decided it was. 2 weeks after the group chat reappeared, I drove to my parents' house in Gastonia. I told myself it was to drop off a set of replacement air filters my father had asked for. That was partly true. Mostly I went because something in my father's 6-word text had pulled at the part of me that still wanted to believe the word family meant something in that house. The living room hadn't changed. Same floral couch, same brass lamp. And on the mantel above the gas fireplace, a new addition, a glass trophy engraved with Rising Founder, Triad Business Journal, 2025. It sat between a framed photo of Liam shaking hands with an investor and a candle my mother had never lit. No photos of me on that mantel. Not one. Liam was in the kitchen when I arrived, eating a sandwich my mother had made for him. He was 30 years old and still ate sandwiches his mother cut diagonally. He looked up, grinned, and said it like a punchline he'd been saving. "Every family needs one success and one cautionary tale, right, Mare?" My mother laughed. My father looked at his hands. I set the air filters on the counter. Before I left, Liam caught me at the door. His grin was gone. He leaned close, voice low. "You're coming to the wedding. I need you there." I asked why. He shrugged, but his eyes didn't match the shrug. "Sienna's dad is old school, wants to see the whole family. Just show up. Be normal. Don't talk about work." Don't talk about work. The one thing I had that was entirely mine, and my brother's instruction was to leave it at the door like muddy shoes. 4 years earlier, Liam had called me at 11 at night. He was 26, 3 months into Viridia, and panicking. He had pitched investors on a proprietary real-time data engine, but he didn't have one. What he had was a pitch deck, a leased office, and a demo that ran on a spreadsheet macro. "I just need the core module," he said. "Something that works for the demo. I'll hire a real team after the round closes." He was my brother. My mother had called me twice that week to tell me Liam was under pressure. My father had sent a rare text. "He could use your help, Mur." So I helped. I spent 3 weeks building a functional prototype, a stripped-down data routing engine inspired by the design principles I used at Halcyon, but written from scratch on my personal laptop, on weekends and after midnight, entirely outside the scope of my employment agreement. I used my own methodology, my own naming conventions, my own logic patterns. I wrote clean, documented, modular code because that's the only kind I know how to write. We signed a consulting agreement. Liam promised a $10,000 fee and a co-architect credit on the technical documentation. He paid me $1,500. The credit never appeared. What did appear, 14 months later, was Viridia's public-facing product page describing their proprietary engine, a system I recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting. Same architecture, same module structure, same variable names in the API documentation. Liam had built Viridia on the bones I gave him. He renamed the modules, changed the color scheme on the dashboard, and called it innovation. I said nothing. My mother would have called me jealous. My father would have gone quiet. And Liam would have looked at me with that grin and said something about how family helps family. So I closed the tab, filed the consulting agreement in a blue folder, and went back to building things that worked. The blue folder lived in the bottom drawer of my desk at home, under a stack of old tax returns and a user manual for a router I no longer owned. It was a standard manila folder I had covered with blue packing tape 3 years ago because the original flap had torn and I didn't want the pages falling out. Inside, a printed copy of the consulting agreement with Liam's signature and mine, dated 4 years back. A PDF printout of the original commit log showing 47 commits over 21 days, all authored by M. Fisher. A 3-page architecture specification I had written in my own shorthand, with margin notes and a coffee ring near the bottom of page 2, and a single printed email from Liam, sent at 2 in the morning. Subject line: "Can you just make the demo work? I'll handle the rest." That email was the last honest thing my brother ever wrote to me about Viridia. I didn't keep the folder as evidence. I didn't keep it to build a case. I kept it because I keep records of my own work. Always have. Every system I've ever designed, every spec I've ever written, I archive it. It's the same instinct that makes me back up my files in 3 locations and label my cables. Some people keep journals. I keep documentation. That Tuesday in March, after reading Liam's message in the group chat and sitting with the cold soup and the quiet apartment, I opened the bottom drawer. I saw the blue folder. Ran my thumb across the tape. Then I closed the drawer. Whatever Liam was building or pretending to build, whatever my parents had poured their savings into, it wasn't my problem anymore. I had made my peace with being invisible. Or I thought I had. Nora told me not to go. We were eating lunch in the Halcyon break room. Turkey wraps, the ones from the place on Trade Street that put too much mustard on everything. And I told her about the wedding. She set down her wrap and looked at me the way she did when a junior engineer was about to push bad code to production. "Why would you go? They treat you like furniture." I couldn't argue with that, but something had shifted in me since January. Maybe it was the therapy. Maybe it was the summit invitation still sitting unanswered in my inbox. Maybe it was just the plain arithmetic of turning 33 and realizing I had spent a decade making myself smaller so the people around me wouldn't have to feel short. "I'm not going to perform small so everyone else feels tall," I told her. Nora raised her eyebrows. "That's a bumper sticker." "It's also true." I called my mother that afternoon and confirmed I'd attend. She sounded relieved. Not for me, but for the head count. "Good. Sienna's family is very organized. Don't bring anyone. Don't wear anything attention-getting. And maybe don't mention Halcyon. Liam gets sensitive when people compare." Compare. As if my career and his existed on the same axis. As if building real infrastructure and building a pitch deck were 2 versions of the same sport. I hung up and sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the blinking cursor on a config file I'd been editing. I almost didn't go. If you've ever talked yourself into shrinking just to keep the peace, you already know that feeling in your chest. Stay with me, because the moment I walked into that ballroom, everything I'd swallowed for years finally had somewhere to land. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how it turned. 3 weeks before the wedding, Viridia was everywhere. Liam landed a feature in a regional tech publication, The Quiet Disruptor: How One Founder Built a Data Engine That Could Change the Game. I read it on my phone during a code review. The article described Viridia's proprietary real-time data intelligence engine as a paradigm shift in pipeline orchestration. The technical description they quoted from Liam was almost word for word from the architecture spec I had written 4 years earlier. Not the spirit of it, the actual sentences. The article mentioned that Viridia was in advanced discussions with Callaway Ventures for a significant Series A round. Gerald Callaway's fund, the same Callaway whose portfolio companies already used Halcyon's Cascade infrastructure, the system I had designed. The irony wasn't lost on me. It just didn't feel like irony yet. It felt like watching someone wear your coat in a photograph and tell everyone they bought it in Milan. My mother posted the article link in the Fisher fam chat with a row of champagne emojis and the words, "Our boy." 12 family members reacted with hearts and thumbs up. I didn't react. I didn't have to. Nobody noticed either way. That same week, Liam appeared on a local podcast. I listened to 43 minutes of my brother describing technology he didn't build, solving problems he didn't understand, using terminology he had learned from the spec I wrote in my apartment while eating reheated pasta at 2 in the morning. He sounded confident. He sounded credible. He sounded like someone who had practiced his lines so many times he had started to believe them. And the worst part, the part that made my hands tighten around my coffee mug, was that his engine was real. I had made it real. I just wasn't part of the story anymore. My mother called on a Thursday evening. I was reviewing a load balancing configuration for Halcyon's Q2 migration. She didn't ask what I was doing. She never did. Meredith, I need to talk to you about the wedding. Her voice had that particular tightness she reserved for conversations where she needed me to cooperate without asking questions. Sienna's family is important. Gerald Calloway is, well, he's not like us. He's the kind of man who pays attention. So when you're there, I need you to be supportive. I told her I'd be polite. I don't mean polite, I mean, don't talk about technical things. Don't bring up Halcyon. Don't say anything that makes Liam feel like you're competing. She paused. For once, just let your brother have his moment. For once, as if I had ever tried to take one. I wanted to ask her when, exactly, she thought I had ever competed with Liam for anything. I wanted to ask her why she had pulled $140,000 out of retirement to fund a company she couldn't describe in a single accurate sentence. I wanted to ask her what it cost her, every time she waved her hand and said she didn't brag about me. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. My mother had grown up in a family where nobody made it. Her father drove a delivery truck. Her mother cleaned offices. Nobody went to college. Nobody built anything. Diane Fisher had spent her whole life terrified of being ordinary, and she had chosen Liam as her proof that she wasn't. If she admitted I was the one who built something real, she'd have to admit she'd been investing in the wrong person for 30 years. That was a debt she couldn't afford to acknowledge. So she covered it with the only currency she had: my silence. 10 days before the wedding, the Fisher fam chat lit up again. This time it wasn't logistics. It was Liam, typing fast, asking if I could take a quick look at some technical documentation before a meeting. He didn't say what meeting. He didn't say with whom. He said, "It's just a review. Like an hour max. Family favor." I recognized the pattern. It was the same cadence as 4 years ago. The same, just a quick thing that turned into 3 weeks of building his company's spine. I scrolled up through the chat history they'd kept me out of. Planning messages, venue photos, seating charts I wasn't consulted on. And buried between a caterer's menu link and Sienna's note about floral arrangements, a message from Liam to my mother. Don't worry, she won't understand what's happening anyway. She just builds back-end stuff. She just builds back-end stuff. The code that ran his entire company was back-end stuff. I typed a reply to his review request. Send me the documents. He sent a 6-page technical summary of Viridia's infrastructure. The same summary, I assumed, that was going to Callaway Ventures. I read it in 14 minutes. He had gotten the architecture overview mostly right because he was describing my work. But the scalability projections were fabricated. The throughput numbers were inflated by a factor of 3. And the section labeled Proprietary Innovation described a load distribution algorithm that I had published in a Halcyon white paper 2 years earlier. Liam hadn't just borrowed my code, he had built an entire narrative around it. A narrative where he was the genius and the engine was his invention. And now he needed me to proofread the lie before he handed it to his fiancé's father. I closed the document. I did not reply. The connection I should have made earlier arrived on a Monday morning during a routine stand-up meeting at Halcyon. Our VP of Client Relations mentioned that Callaway Ventures had recently renewed their enterprise license for Cascade. They're one of our longest infrastructure clients, she said. Gerald Callaway apparently reviewed the architecture documentation himself when they first signed. He told our sales team it was some of the cleanest system design he'd seen in 20 years. She looked at me. That was your work, Meredith. I nodded, took a sip of coffee, didn't say anything. But a small, cold wire connected 2 points in my head that I had been keeping separate. Gerald Callaway knew Cascade. Gerald Callaway was about to invest in Viridia. Viridia's engine was Cascade's younger sister. Same bones, same logic, same handwriting. If Callaway's team ran any kind of serious technical due diligence on Viridia, they would find code patterns, naming conventions, and structural choices that matched Cascade's architecture at a foundational level. And if they looked at the authorship of those modules, they would find the name M. Fisher. My name. I sat with that knowledge the way you sit with a headache you're not ready to take medication for. Aware of it, uncomfortable, choosing not to act. It wasn't my job to police my brother's company. It wasn't my responsibility to call his investors and tell them the engine they were evaluating was built by someone who was never credited, never paid, and never mentioned in any of Viridia's filings. The truth was, sitting in my bottom drawer, inside a blue folder, waiting for nobody. If it mattered, it would surface through the right channels. If it didn't, I would go on building things that worked and letting other people take credit. I had done it before. 2 weeks before the wedding, the pressure from my family shifted from passive to active. Liam texted me directly, not the group chat, not through my mother, but a private message at 9 at night. Be there by 4. Sit where they tell you. Don't be late and don't overdress. Sienna's family notices everything. I read the message twice. My brother was managing me like a variable in a system he didn't understand. I almost laughed. Then my father called. It was the second time he'd called me voluntarily in over a year. His voice was careful, the way it got when he was trying to say something important without actually saying it. Meredith, your mother and I, we've got a lot riding on this. The wedding, the business, all of it. He paused. I just need this to work out for him. We put everything in. Everything. He meant the 140,000. He meant the retirement account that now depended on Liam's startup being worth what Liam said it was worth. He meant the bet he and my mother had placed on their golden child. A bet they couldn't unwind without admitting they'd been wrong about everything for a decade. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not resentment. A dull, heavy sadness, like holding a box that was too full to close. My parents were scared. They were 60 and 62 years old, and they had traded their security for a company built on borrowed architecture and inflated numbers. They didn't know that. They couldn't know that. Because the only person who understood what Viridia actually was, what it was built on, where its code came from, what its real capabilities were, was the daughter they didn't brag about. The message arrived on a Wednesday morning. It came through LinkedIn. A connection request followed by a note from someone named Devin Pratt, Senior Technical Analyst at Callaway Ventures. The note was professional, neutral, and specific. Ms. Fisher, our firm is conducting a technical assessment of a portfolio candidate in the data infrastructure space. During our code review, we identified architectural patterns and module structures that closely align with published documentation attributed to your work on Cascade at Halcyon Systems. We would appreciate the opportunity to discuss provenance and authorship of certain foundational components. This is a standard part of our due diligence process. Could you make yourself available for a brief call this week? I read it 3 times. My heart rate stayed steady. Years of reading diagnostics under pressure had given me that. But my hands moved before my thoughts caught up. I opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the blue folder, laid it flat on my desk and opened it for the first time in over a year. The consulting agreement. Liam's signature, slanted and hurried. My signature, neat. Dated 4 years ago. The commit log. 47 entries in 21 days. Everyone authored by M. Fisher. The architecture spec, 3 pages. My handwriting in the margins. The coffee ring still dark near the bottom of page 2. And Liam's email. Can you just make the demo work? Everything was there. It had always been there. The folder wasn't a weapon. It was a record. The same kind of record I kept for every system I'd ever built. Timestamps, authorship, version history. The difference was that this particular record now sat at the exact intersection of my brother's ambition and his investor's due diligence. I hadn't put it there. The truth had just walked itself into the room. I closed the folder. I did not reply to Devin Pratt that day. I spent 2 days thinking about that LinkedIn message, not because the answer was complicated. The answer was simple. Yes, I wrote the code. Here are the records. The hard part was the math around it. If I confirmed authorship to Callaway's analyst, the due diligence report would flag Viridia's IP provenance as unresolved. An unresolved IP flag in a Series A round wasn't a speed bump, it was a wall. The investment would stall, maybe collapse. Liam's company, the one my parents had staked their retirement on, the one my mother recited like scripture, the one my brother had built his entire identity around, would face the kind of scrutiny that, fake it till you make it, doesn't survive. And everyone would blame me. My mother would say I did it out of jealousy. My father would go silent in a way that felt worse than shouting. Liam would tell anyone who listened that his sister sabotaged him because she couldn't handle his success. I sat at my desk for a long time, looking at the cursor on my screen. Then I opened a text editor and typed a sentence I didn't send to anyone. It was just for me. I will not lie about my own work. That was the whole of it. I wasn't going to call Callaway Ventures and volunteer a confession. I wasn't going to march into Liam's office with the blue folder and demand credit. But if someone from the investors team asked me a direct question about code I had written, I was going to tell the truth. I wasn't going to lie about my own work. Not for Liam. Not for my mother. Not for a family that had spent a decade pretending I didn't exist. I replied to Devin Pratt. I said I was available Thursday. The rehearsal dinner was held at a vineyard 40 minutes outside Charlotte. White tablecloths, string lights. Sienna had hired a calligrapher for the place cards. I found mine at a table near the kitchen door, wedged between a second cousin I'd met once and a college friend of Sienna's who spent the evening on her phone. Liam and Sienna sat at the head table with Gerald and Sienna's mother, Patricia. My parents sat one table over, close enough to orbit, far enough to earn. When introductions went around the room, Liam stood up and worked the crowd with the ease of someone who had practiced charm the way I practiced code review. Repetition, iteration, polish. He introduced his parents with warmth. He introduced Sienna's family with reverence. When he got to me, he paused. And this is my sister Meredith. She works with computers. A polite ripple of smiles. One man at a corner table, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, name tag I couldn't read from my seat. Tilted his head slightly when he heard my name. Not a reaction, exactly. More like recognition catching on a snag. The rehearsal dinner moved on. Toasts were given. Liam told a story about how Viridia almost didn't launch. But I coded through the night and made it happen. I ate my salmon. I did not correct him. After dinner, as guests drifted toward the parking lot, the man with wire-rimmed glasses passed my table. He stopped. Meredith Fisher? I nodded. I think I saw your name on a pipeline architecture panel in Atlanta. Scalable orchestration? I nodded again. He smiled, small, knowing, and walked away. I never got his name. But someone in that room had recognized mine, and for a reason that had nothing to do with Liam. On the drive home from the rehearsal, I put the pieces together. Not all at once. More like tiles clicking into a mosaic I'd been assembling without realizing I was building anything. Liam didn't invite me to the wedding because he wanted me there. He invited me because he needed Gerald Callaway to see a complete family, a normal family, a family that showed up, smiled, and didn't say anything inconvenient. But more than that, he needed me to be small. Visibly, publicly, undeniably small. Because if Meredith Fisher ever came up in conversation with Gerald Callaway's technical team, Liam needed the room's memory of me to be a quiet woman at a back table who worked with computers. A nobody. A family footnote. A cautionary tale. If I was already labeled, if everyone had already seen me dismissed and diminished and introduced as an afterthought, then anything I said later about Viridia's code would sound like bitterness, like jealousy, like a failure trying to drag down a success. That was the strategy. Not conscious, maybe. Liam wasn't a planner, but he had the instincts of someone who had survived by controlling the narrative, and the narrative required me in the room, wearing my assigned role like a name tag. What my brother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Gerald Callaway's team had already been in my inbox. The due diligence was already running. And the architect whose name was flagged in their technical review wasn't an anonymous contractor or a disgruntled ex-employee. She was sitting at table 9, eating salmon, being introduced as the family failure. The collision was coming. I hadn't arranged it. I hadn't planned it. I had simply stopped being willing to lie about what I'd built. And the truth, as it tends to do, was finding its own way to the surface. The wedding was held at Callaway Estate. 22 acres of rolling lawn, a stone manor house, and a reception hall with marble floors and ceilings high enough to make you feel like you'd been miniaturized. A string quartet played Debussy near the entrance. Champagne flutes stood at attention on silver trays carried by waitstaff in black vests. Everything about the setting announced money that had been around long enough to stop announcing itself. I arrived at 4, wearing a navy dress I'd bought 2 years ago for a conference I'd ended up skipping. Simple, clean lines, no jewelry except a watch my grandmother had given me. My mother would have preferred I'd worn something that faded further into the background. I chose the dress because it was mine, and I liked it, and I was done dressing for her comfort. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. Sienna looked luminous. Liam looked like a man who had rehearsed his tears. My parents sat in the second row, my mother in a lavender suit she'd bought for the occasion, my father in a tie that didn't quite match his shirt. They looked proud. They looked invested. In every sense of the word. I sat 4 rows back, between strangers, watching my brother promise to love and cherish a woman whose father ran the fund that was about to evaluate whether his company was real. I want you to picture it. Marble floors, a string quartet, and me, the one they told to keep quiet. I almost turned around at the door. If a part of you has ever stood at the edge of a room wondering if you belong, stay with me. What the bride's father said next changed which side of that room I stood on. Comment, truth, if you're rooting for her. The reception began at 6. Tables were arranged in concentric arcs around a dance floor. My seat was at the outer ring, table 11, near a side exit and a potted fern. Liam had assigned my placement personally. He told me this with a smile when he found me holding a glass of water near the bar. You're at 11. It's a great table. You can see the whole room. I could also be seen by nobody. He took my elbow, lightly, performatively, and began walking me through the crowd. This was his show. I was a prop. He introduced me to Sienna's aunt. This is my sister. She's in IT. He introduced me to a groomsman. Meredith. She's the quiet one. He introduced me to a couple I didn't recognize. Family's bookworm. Never leaves her desk. Each introduction was a small, precise cut, friendly enough to pass for humor, sharp enough to draw blood. My parents trailed behind us. My mother smiled and nodded. My father looked at his shoes. When Sienna's mother asked me what I did, my mother jumped in before I could answer. She's in tech support, I think. Something like that. I let it land. I let all of it land. But when Liam squeezed my arm and leaned in to whisper, "See? Nobody cares, Mir. Just relax." I pulled my arm free. Not dramatically. Not with a scene. Just enough that he felt the absence. "You can introduce me," I said quietly. "You don't get to script me." He blinked. Then the grin came back, the one that had been protecting him from accountability since childhood. "Relax, sis. It's a party." He walked away. I stayed where I was, standing full height, drinking water, waiting. Gerald Calloway entered the reception at 6:30. He had been taking photographs with the wedding party, and his arrival shifted the energy in the room the way a current shifts the surface of a lake. Subtle, total. He was taller than I'd expected. Gray at the temples. He wore his suit like it owed him nothing. His handshake when he greeted people was brief and direct. He didn't smile reflexively. He read the room before the room read him. Sienna kissed his cheek and brought him to a table where my parents were already seated, champagne in hand, performing their best version of a family with nothing to hide. Liam was magnetic in that moment, standing taller, speaking louder, telling a story about Viridia's latest partnership that I happened to know was still in the letter of intent stage. Gerald listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't nod along. He just watched Liam the way an engineer watches a system under load, looking for where the strain would show. I wasn't supposed to be nearby. My table was across the room, but the bar was between them and me, and I was still holding my glass of water when Liam spotted me. His eyes lit up, not with affection, but with utility. "Dad, come here. You haven't met my sister yet." He said it to Gerald, but it was aimed at me. He reached out and pulled me toward the circle the way you'd pull a suitcase off a carousel. Functional, graceless, purposeful. Gerald turned. My mother straightened in her chair. My father set down his champagne glass, and Liam, grinning so wide his molars caught the overhead light, positioned me in front of the man whose fund was about to make or break his entire company. Liam had one hand on my shoulder and the other holding a champagne flute. He turned to Gerald with the grin, the one that was half charm and half armor, and said it clearly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "This is our family failure." He laughed, the kind of laugh designed to give other people permission to laugh too. A few guests obliged. My mother, seated 3 feet away, tipped her glass slightly and added her signature line, the one she had tested at dinner tables and church functions and neighborhood barbecues, until it had the smooth delivery of a campaign slogan. "We don't brag about her." She said it to Gerald's wife Patricia, who smiled politely. She said it the way she always said it, as a kindness, as modesty, as a mother who simply had one child worth discussing and one she kept in the margins. My father looked at his plate. Liam squeezed my shoulder. I stood still. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't perform the role I'd been assigned, the good-natured sister who absorbs the joke, who plays along, who makes the golden child shine brighter by standing in his shadow. I stood with my back straight and my hands at my sides, and my face absolutely neutral. 33 years of being the punchline, and I was finished laughing on cue. Gerald Calloway had not spoken. He had watched Liam deliver the line. He had watched my mother add hers. And now he turned. Slowly. The way someone turns when they're recalculating everything they thought they knew about the room they're standing in, and looked directly at me. Not at Liam. Not at my parents. At me. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp or a double take. His brow drew together. His lips pressed thin. He went completely still. Gerald Calloway spoke quietly. The string quartet had paused between movements, and his voice carried further than he probably intended. Or maybe exactly as far as he intended. "So it's you. This is unexpected." 2 sentences. That's all it took to tilt the room. Liam's grin froze. My mother set down her champagne glass. Patricia Calloway looked at her husband with an expression that said she had seen this particular stillness before and knew what it preceded. "I'm sorry?" Liam said. He was still smiling, but the smile had detached from the rest of his face. "Do you two know each other?" Gerald didn't look at Liam. He was still looking at me. "Monsieur Fisher," he said. Not a question, a confirmation. "Cascade, Halcyon Systems." I nodded. "Yes. Your architecture runs in 11 of my portfolio companies." 12, I said. MedSync migrated to Cascade in January. Gerald's jaw tightened. Not with anger, but with something closer to the expression of a man who has just realized the math he's been running has a variable he missed. "Devon's report flagged the provenance issue last week," he said, almost to himself. "I assumed the M. Fisher in the authorship records was a former contractor. Or a coincidence." He looked at Liam, then back at me. "You're his sister?" "Yes." "And you built the foundational modules that Viridia's engine is based on?" I didn't hesitate. I didn't soften it. I didn't dress it up or qualify it or add caveats to protect anyone's feelings. I wrote the original architecture. The consulting agreement is dated 4 years ago. The commit history is mine. The room had gotten very quiet. Not silent. There was still the clink of glasses somewhere. Still the murmur of guests who hadn't noticed. But the circle around us, Liam, my parents, Patricia, Gerald and me, had become its own atmosphere. Liam moved first. He stepped between me and Gerald, his body language shifting from charming host to cornered animal in the space of a breath. Okay, hold on, hold on. This is... She's exaggerating. She helped with an early prototype. That's it. Everything Viridia is today. The engine, the product, the platform. That's my team. My vision. She wrote a few lines of code 4 years ago. He looked at Gerald with a version of the grin that had stopped working. You know how it is. Family members always think they contributed more than they did. Gerald tilted his head. The module architecture in your engine matches Cascade's published design patterns at a structural level. Devon's report identified naming conventions, dependency trees, and routing logic that are functionally identical. He paused. Can you explain the load distribution algorithm in your core pipeline? Liam blinked. The technical team handles the specifics. I'm the CEO. I focus on strategy and... The algorithm, Gerald said. Not unkind, just precise. It's a weighted round robin with adaptive latency thresholds. Your documentation says it's proprietary. Can you describe how it works? Liam opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked at me, not with hatred, not yet, but with the panicked recognition of a man who has run out of runway and can see the trees. My mother stood up from her chair. Gerald, this is a wedding. This isn't the time for... Diane, my father said quietly. It was the first word he'd spoken in 20 minutes. She stopped. Gerald looked at me again. Ms. Fisher, I'm going to ask you something directly. I met his eyes. Go ahead. Is the core engine of Viridia your original work? Yes. I said it the way I would answer a technical question in a code review, clearly, specifically, without emotion. The core engine of Viridia is based on a data routing prototype I built over 3 weeks 4 years ago. The architecture follows a design spec I wrote myself. The commit history is entirely mine. I signed a consulting agreement with my brother, which he did not honor. No payment in full, no co-architect credit. The codebase was never formally assigned to Viridia. I built it on my own time, on my own equipment, outside the scope of my Halcyon employment agreement, and the IP was never transferred. I wasn't performing. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't tearful or triumphant or shaking with vindication. I was answering a direct question with documented facts. That was the only weapon I'd ever needed. Liam's face went red. You're doing this here? At my wedding? You asked me to come? I came. You introduced me to your investor. He asked me a question. I answered it. You planned this. I didn't plan anything. I don't lie about my own work. Not for anyone. Liam turned to Gerald. She's bitter. She's... Look, this is a family issue. Whatever she thinks she... The IP was never assigned, Gerald said, cutting him off with the gentle finality of a man who had spent 30 years reading contracts. If the core architecture isn't owned by the company, the investment can't proceed. This isn't personal. It's due diligence. My mother's face had gone the color of chalk. My father was looking at me, not with anger, but with something that might have been the first stage of understanding. The room felt smaller. The quartet had started again. Pachelbel, of all things, and the melody floated over the silence between us like a hand reaching across a table nobody was sitting at. What happened next didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers, the way a building settles before it fails. Cracks first, then creaks. Then the slow, irreversible shifting of weight that was never distributed correctly. Gerald stepped back from Liam. Not physically. He was already standing apart. But his posture changed. His shoulders squared. His hands clasped behind his back. It was the posture of a man who had made a decision and was now simply executing it. Liam, I want to be clear, Gerald said. His voice was low, measured, without heat. Our firm's investment in Viridia was contingent on clean IP ownership. The preliminary flag in Devon's report was serious enough that I raised it with your team last Tuesday. Your CTO told me the architecture was developed in-house. That is demonstrably not the case. Liam shook his head violently. She's lying. She's doing this because she's jealous of everything She's not lying. Gerald said it without raising his voice. I've used her architecture. I've read her documentation. I know what her systems look like from the inside. Your engine is her work. That sentence landed on the room like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples went outward. Guests at the nearest tables had stopped talking. Sienna, who had been dancing with a cousin, noticed the silence and started walking toward us. My mother stood frozen, one hand on the back of her chair, her mouth slightly open. A woman watching the investment she had made in her own story collapse in real time. My father was staring at the floor. His hands were shaking. And Liam, who had charmed investors and reporters and boardrooms, Liam, who had built a career on the foundation I'd poured and the narrative he'd constructed on top of it, Liam was unraveling. Liam turned on me. His face was the color of raw brick, and his voice had climbed into a register I hadn't heard since we were children, and he'd broken something he couldn't blame on the dog. You did this on purpose. You came here to ruin this for me. I didn't respond. You couldn't stand it. You never could. You sit in your little cubicle building your little systems and you can't handle that I'm the one who actually made something of himself. Liam. Gerald's voice was a flat wall. Liam spun toward the display table near the entrance, the one arranged with photos of him and Sienna, a guest book, a champagne tower, and the glass trophy. The Rising Founder Award from the Triad Business Journal, 2025. The one that had lived on my parents' mantle, transported to the venue like a sacred relic. Liam grabbed it. I don't think he meant to throw it. I think he meant to hold it up as proof. Proof that he was real. That what he'd built was real. That the engraving on the glass meant more than a commit log in a blue folder. But his hands were shaking and the glass was heavier than rage, and it slipped. It hit the marble floor and shattered. The sound cut through the reception like a gunshot. Crystal fragments slid across the floor in every direction. Sienna stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the dance floor, her dress pooled around her feet, staring at the man she was supposed to have married that afternoon. And the look on her face wasn't anger. It was recalibration. The same expression I'd seen on Gerald's face minutes before. The expression of someone running the numbers again and arriving at a different total. Nobody moved. Pachelbel kept playing. And among the broken glass on the marble floor, the word founder was still readable on one of the larger fragments. My mother broke first. Not with tears. With strategy. She crossed the floor toward Gerald, heels clicking on the marble, champagne-stained napkin still clutched in her left hand, and did what she had always done. She tried to renegotiate reality. Gerald, please. This is a family matter. Meredith has always had issues. She's jealous. She's competitive. She doesn't understand business. Mrs. Fisher. Gerald's voice was not unkind. Your daughter's architecture is licensed by my fund. Her published work is referenced in 3 industry white papers. The system she designed handles more daily transactions than any product in my current portfolio. He paused. I don't know what she is in your family, but in my industry, she's one of the most respected infrastructure architects in the Southeast. My mother's mouth opened, closed. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for one fraction of a second I saw something behind the performance. Fear. The pure, uncut terror of a woman who has spent 30 years constructing a story about who her children are and has just heard a stranger dismantle it with facts she can't argue with. Then it was gone. Her face hardened. Well, if she's so successful, why didn't she ever say something? Why didn't she help her brother properly? There it was. Even now. Even with the glass on the floor and the investor pulling away and the entire narrative in pieces around her feet. My mother found a way to make it my fault. I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with. The blue folder existed. The commit log existed. The consulting agreement existed. I hadn't needed to bring any of them to the wedding, because the truth had done its own audit. Gerald's team had asked the right questions. I had answered honestly. That was all. The money came up the way money always does in families that have staked everything on a single bet. Not in a boardroom, but in a hallway, between courses, in voices too loud for the setting and too quiet for the magnitude of what had been lost. My father pulled me aside near the coat room. His tie was loosened, his eyes were wet. The retirement, we put in 140,000. Your mother and I, we believed him. I nodded. I know. Is it gone? I don't know, Dad. That depends on what Viridia has left without the Callaway round. He leaned against the wall. He looked old. Older than 62. Older than a man should look at his son's wedding. And for a moment, I felt the weight of something I hadn't expected. Grief. Not for what Liam had done to me, for what my parents had done to themselves. My mother appeared at the end of the hallway. She walked toward us with the particular urgency of a woman who has just lost control of a situation and is looking for someone to contain. Meredith, you need to fix this. I didn't break it, Mom. You didn't have to come here and... You told me to come. Liam told me to come. You added me back to the group chat so I could confirm my attendance at an event where my job was to stand still and be small. Her eyes flickered. Something beneath the armor. Just for a heartbeat. I just wanted one thing to be proud of, she said. Her voice cracked. It was the most honest sentence she had ever spoken to me. Then she straightened her shoulders, blinked twice and said, You should have stayed quiet. You owed us that. The moment was gone. The wall was back up. I turned and walked toward the exit. Gerald found me near the front entrance. I was standing under the portico, my car keys in my hand, the cool evening air pulling at the hem of my dress. The estate grounds were lit with landscape lighting that turned the trees into something out of a painting, beautiful, staged, and entirely for someone else's benefit. Ms. Fisher. I turned. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see the reception continuing. Diminished, confused, but continuing. Sienna was sitting at a table with her mother. Liam was nowhere visible. I want to be straightforward with you, Gerald said. The investment in Viridia is not proceeding. That decision was made before tonight, based on the technical review. What happened in there didn't change the outcome. It just accelerated the timeline. I nodded. I also want to say that I owe you an apology. Not for the due diligence. That's process. But for not connecting the name on the report to the person in the room sooner. I should have reached out to you directly before tonight. You didn't know I was his sister. No, but I should have made the connection. Devon's report was thorough. The authorship was clear. He paused. For what it's worth, your work speaks for itself. It always has. I didn't need Gerald Callaway's validation. I had built Cascade without it. I had built a career without it. I had stood in that ballroom and answered his question without needing anyone's permission or approval. But hearing it, hearing a man who read balance sheets the way I read system logs, acknowledge the architecture of what I had built, that wasn't nothing. Thank you, I said. He nodded. I walked to my car. I came when I was told to. I was leaving because I chose to. The fallout arrived the way data arrives, in packets, at intervals, each one adding resolution to a picture that was already clear to anyone paying attention. Callaway Ventures formally withdrew from Viridia's Series A within 72 hours. The stated reason was neutral, unresolved IP provenance. But in the industry, neutral language is its own kind of verdict. 2 other investors who had been circling pulled back within a week. The regional tech publication that had profiled Liam as the quiet disruptor ran a follow-up that was significantly less flattering. Viridia didn't collapse overnight. These things rarely do. But the scaffolding was gone, and what remained was a company without clean ownership of its core technology, without its lead investor, and without the narrative that had been holding it together. The wedding was postponed. Sienna moved back into her parents' estate. I don't know whether she and Liam spoke after that night. That wasn't my business to track. In the Fisher fam chat, the one I'd been removed from, added back to, and never once genuinely included in, my parents sent me a message for the first time that had nothing to do with Liam. My father wrote, "Are you doing all right, Mare?" My mother wrote nothing for 3 days. Then, You could have told us, I replied once. I'm open to talking when the conversation starts with respect. Not before. Nobody responded. That was fine. I wasn't waiting for an answer. I was setting a boundary. The kind I should have set a decade earlier. The kind you can only set once you've stopped believing you deserve the silence people have been giving you. I went back to Halcyon the following Monday. Cascade was still running. 400 million transactions a day, 9 states, 0 fanfare. Nora brought me a coffee and didn't ask about the wedding. She just sat next to me at my desk and said, "You look like someone who finally exhaled." I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in a week. The summit invitation was still in my inbox. The one in Atlanta. The panel on scalable orchestration architecture. I accepted it that afternoon. Not because Gerald Calloway's words had given me permission. Not because Liam's collapse had made me brave. Because I had spent 10 years building systems that held the weight of industries, and I had done it while my family called me a failure to my face, and I was finished letting their vocabulary define mine. The failure was never me. The failure was a family that measured worth by volume, by who talked the loudest, who raised the most money, who could fill a room with the sound of their own mythology. I had filled rooms with infrastructure, with reliability, with the kind of quiet, invisible work that people only notice when it breaks. And mine never broke. Your worth was never something they had to brag about for it to be real. It was always doing its quiet work, steady as a pulse, with or without their applause. That's my story. A blue folder I almost threw away. A room that told me to stay small. And a truth that stood up on its own when I finally stopped holding it down. If you've ever been the one nobody bragged about, let this be your sign. Stop shrinking. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.